All right, I do want to make sure that we go ahead and get started because we want to make these 3 hours on Zoom fly by for you. We're so appreciative of your taking the time on a Saturday to join us. I know it's been a long week of Zoom meetings for everyone, but this will hopefully be more enjoyable, and feel free to eat your snacks, take breaks when you need to. So I know some other people will be dialing in right now, but I'll go ahead and get started. I know many of your faces on the line today, which is great. But for those of you who I haven't met yet, my name is Sarah Rawls, and I serve as Executive Director of the Regional Engagement and Volunteer Management Team at Emory's Office of Advancement and Alumni Engagement, which I know is a mouthful. Amidst all the challenges and ambiguity going on right now, we are all, I speak on behalf of all the employees on the line, we're incredibly energized and inspired to see that 73 alumni volunteer leaders are joining us today. And I know many more want to join us but need to listen to the recording later, especially our international folks. But 73 alumni leaders, and you all represent 45 Emory networks here today. And these range from our Miami network to our LGBT+ network to our CDC employee group, which thank you again, CDC employees, for the work that you're doing right now, to the business and finance network in DC. So I just call out a few of those to share that this range exemplifies Emory's vision to provide platforms for our alumni to gather around any affinity and identity that is most meaningful for them throughout their lifetime. So thank you for making that possible. And some of you on the line have been loyal volunteer leaders for years, whether that's through the networks or other boards and colleges around Emory. And some of you just stepped up this year to lead a newly forming network board. So we are greatly, we appreciate your work, and we want to recognize the difficulties that this year presented and continues to present, but share our gratitude for your continued leadership. We know that this leadership is more important now than ever before because we need to step up and support our alumni, but also call upon those who can make a difference in their own volunteerism and philanthropy if they are able. So I hope you will enjoy this time to hear updates on Emory's direction. We do have a lot of exciting things to share, and we'll be hearing about those momentarily. And you can decide how you'll apply this to your own communities and then brainstorm with your fellow volunteer leaders today about finding new ways to reach your members. And again, as I keep saying, this is not going to touch upon all the information that we need to share with you right now. So more will be forthcoming, but we didn't want to take up too much of your time today. So with that, I'll turn it over to Josh Newton, Emory's Senior Associate Vice President for Advancement and Alumni Engagement. Many of you might know Josh from his frequent travels around the globe to meet with Emory communities. He loves doing that and has hated being back in Atlanta for a few months, I think. And Josh is a huge supporter of Emory Network. So thank you for being here today, Josh.
Of course. Thank you, Sarah. Hello, everyone. I see some longtime friends. I know I'm not supposed to say old friends, so longtime friends on the call, as well as some new faces. And certainly want to thank you all and add to Sarah's for joining us today and for taking the time to be a part of this call, but more importantly, to be a part of our network leadership around the country, around the globe, in supporting Emory and our efforts to elevate alumni engagement. I'll talk about a couple of things at the top of my talk. First, our new president. And also COVID and the impact that obviously that's continuing to have on the campus. And then I'll shift and focus most of my comments around alumni engagement, the role that you play and the work that you're doing, and how we continue to support you in your efforts. So our president is celebrating 2 weeks on the job. He started on Saturday, August 1st. Although he started way before that. I had my first meeting with him back in early June and actually started weekly meetings with him over the summer. He certainly has hit the ground running. He's masked up today and helping move in our freshmen. So our freshmen are moving in, many of them today, and he's participating in that. I can certainly assure you that he is going to be a friend to our work. He talks about the 3 areas that he is focused on already. He talks about it frequently, and that being our students and engaging with our student population, and really elevating and defining and elevating what is the Emory student experience, and how we need to focus on elevating that student experience for both our undergraduate and graduate students. Our faculty, as many of you know, a huge transformation took place at Emory in the late 70s, early 80s, and a lot of faculty hiring was done around that time and obviously continued. But we are seeing over the last several years, and will continue to see, a significant transition in our faculty. So he is clearly focused on building and strengthening our faculty and continuing to elevate the work that we do through our faculty at the university. Alumni is the third, and he talks frequently about the need to lean into our alumni community, to focus on our alumni community, and to continue to build and connect to our alumni community. And I speak very candidly about that in ways that we have not historically, and I know that we need to do more of, and that will often be done through the work that you're doing out in the regions, chapters, networks, and supporting our work. So I'll get to talking about that, but he and I speak often about that. I've talked about the history of alumni engagement and what I see as some of the attributes that have led to some apathy within our alumni community and lack of connectivity and consistent connectivity, which I'll also be talking about. COVID, obviously, I talk about March 13th. It was a Friday the 13th that we all went home from the office and were told to start working from home. Never did I imagine that here we would be sitting in August and through, it looks like the rest of this year at least, if not into next year, and completely had to retool the way we went about our work and certainly all the work at the university. Very proud of Emory during this period and what we're doing, certainly on the healthcare side, our frontline workers, but also our researchers. There are multiple vaccine trials happening at Emory and lots of work taking place around that, those efforts. If you haven't been to the Emory Together page, which is our COVID-related activity around the return to campus, I would certainly encourage you to go there. It outlines a lot of what's happening this fall in relation to our student populations. We will have, last count I heard was around 1,550 students on campus this fall. Most of our freshmen are moving in this weekend and will be on campus, but other upperclassmen at the undergraduate level, many of them are not on campus this fall. Obviously, we're along with the rest of the world, not sure what will happen as we move into the spring semester. There are daily conversations about our continued engagement. And I would like to talk with you as we talk about our alumni engagement work through the affinity groups and chapters and how you could support us and support our students during this time. So I will get to that in my comments. I'll go ahead and shift to alumni engagement. Sarah hears me talk about this often. I say that alumni engagement is key to Emory's success as we think about how we move forward. So I'm going to talk a little bit in numbers here for a second, just to contextualize with you. We have around 155,000 alumni around the globe. And at this point, for the last 4 years, we hit an important shift. And that shift is that Emory officially has more graduate alumni than it has undergraduate alumni. I believe the last count I saw was 78,000 graduate alumni and 74,000 undergraduate alumni. So how we program for alumni engagement, how we think about our alumni communities, and the disparate alumni communities and affinity groups we have, I do think about the varying ways that we need to engage our undergraduate, graduate alumni, our alumni here in Atlanta and Georgia, our alumni around the US, and then our alumni internationally. On a yearly basis, our goal this year is to engage 37,500 alumni within this fiscal year that ends this month. That would give us around a 23-24% alumni engagement rate. That would be the most alumni we have ever engaged in a single fiscal year. And I'm going to talk about that in the context that we have to do better if we're going to build the kind of alumni community that we need to build for Emory University. Over the last 5 years, more than 50% of our alumni have engaged with us. In fact, I think it's closer to 60% in some of the numbers that I've seen. But what we struggle with is the consistent engagement from year to year and meeting the varying needs of our alumni communities and engaging them in the ways that they want to be engaged. So that is why your work and our networks and affinity groups are so important to our work. The traditional model of alumni engagement for universities was to engage alumni based on the school they graduated from, right? The law school engaged the law school alumni, or business or medicine, et cetera. That is no more. I mean, as I say, alumni have varying interests. Their interests evolve and change over their lifespan, and they want to engage with their university in different ways that speak to their interests, their needs, and varying communities. That is why it is so important that we have affinity groups from SIBA to LGBT and women's groups, that we have book clubs, and that we have real estate networks and regional gatherings. So many different, I think Sarah said there were 45 different interests represented on the call, but Sarah, how many different groups do we have total of record right now?
87, but that number grows every day. So
87 and growing different networks. I know one of our newest is on the call, our 60 plus network. So we are trying to find ways to engage our alumni community that meet the needs of our alumni where they are today and to evolve with them over time. How people want to engage with Emory obviously changes. They may want to engage with their school, but they may want to engage around topical interests, right? Personal interests. So we are trying to find ways to continue to build and strengthen our network. When I talk about 37,500 at 24%, that would put us at one of the lowest engagement rates amongst our peers. And my goal is that we get to, my team knows this, they hear it all the time. I talked to Sarah's retreat this week, but my goal is to get us to a third alumni engagement on a yearly basis, consistent engagement, right? So that would mean that we would need somewhere between 50 and 55,000 alums engaging with us meaningfully year over year, consistently through the various programs that we're offering. That is no small task. The team will tell you, elevating from 37,500 to 55,000 alumni engaged over the course of a year is going to take all of us. They asked me this week on their staff retreat call, how do we get there? And my answer was our volunteer leaders, right? It's going to take our volunteer leaders continuing to partner and engage with us, meeting the various needs of our alumni community for us to be able to elevate our engagement to that level. Why do we need a strong alumni network, right? I want a strong alumni network that supports you, that supports each other. Alumni supporting alumni and engaging them with the life of the university academically, socially, personally, in ways that you find meaningful. But I want a strong alumni community because I want the alumni community to support our student population, right? Great universities are great communities. That's the way I think about it. Obviously, great universities are great academic communities, but they're also great communities, and they provide support to one another, especially in this time around COVID. I said earlier that around 1,550 of our students will be on campus this summer. I would love to see your work support our students in particular during this time, but in an ongoing way, right? Students who are stuck home in Houston and doing remote, I want our alumni in Houston to reach out to them, to engage with them and to check in with them. How are you doing? How can we support you during this time? I want our affinity groups and our school-based groups to reach out. I want the student population to feel embraced and supported by the alumni community in ways that they know that there is a community out there to support them, not just now when they're students, but obviously when they graduate. And through their life cycle, that there will be an alumni community there to support them. And that is the type of alumni community I want. I talk about in a post-COVID environment when people ask me what I would like to see related to alumni engagement. And what I want to see is that continuum. I tell a story about that when a student applies to Emory, that an alumni would interview them, right? Part of our alumni interviewing program. When they get accepted to Emory, early decision, regular decision, to the med school, to the law school, to the public health school, some alum in the city where they live who graduated from that school would call and congratulate them and welcome them to the Emory family. An alum, maybe that same alum would reach out to them in the spring, check in on their senior year or their last year in college or their transition into the MBA program at Wayzata and support them in that transition as they're coming to Emory. That we would talk to them about their goals and aspirations, what they want to major in, mentors, a one-off mentor, somebody they just want to talk to about making a decision about their major, about their career, that the alumni community would be there in a consistent way for someone from the time that they apply until they're accepted through their journey and certainly when they leave Emory. I'm fascinated when I talk to students these days as I'm feeling increasingly older, but I was even talking to our SGA president over the summer who hesitated to reach out to the alumni network. And I asked him why, like, why would you hesitate? And he said, well, it doesn't feel comfortable asking for help, asking for someone to do something for me. I feel like that I should, do it myself. So I turned the question around on him. I said, in 5 years, he is moved to DC. He wants to work on the Hill. And I said to him, in 5 years, when you've established your career, if I call and ask you to meet with a current student who has the same interest, and he stopped me and said, oh, absolutely, I would love to talk to them. And I said, but you just said you didn't feel comfortable doing the same within our alumni community right now. I think that we have to be more proactive in breaking down those barriers and reaching out to our students and offering that support, right? Offering, obviously the alumni interview, but congratulating and welcome them to the family when there's an acceptance at all schools, at all levels. Asking how we can be a part of their career journey, of their academic journey, and certainly alumni journey. I talk about, again, great universities. When an alum runs into an alum, they have an immediate bond and they want to find ways to connect and to support each other. That has not been necessarily the Emory community. We have not nurtured and fostered. I have people on this call who I talked to who said it was 20 years after I graduated before someone from Emory reached out to me, or I went 5 years between someone contacted me. We have to build a model of engagement that is not just staff driven, right? We have to do better from a staffing standpoint, and we have to build a model of staffing in our division that provides consistent engagement over time, regardless who the staff member is in that role. But we must have volunteer leaders like you who are part of that conversation, who provide the continuum of engagement for our alumni community with each other. And that has been the missing link. We have not had a strong volunteer network historically. We've had different subsets within different communities that I think have worked well over the years. But the consistent engagement of our alumni, supporting each other, supported by a team back at Emory or in regions around the country, and then moving them into a lifetime of engagement, right? From young alumni engagement through their careers and into retirement, with our new group, right? That provides continued academic connection, social outlet, and other engagement. So I'm excited about building a model of engagement, a model of connectivity, a community that supports each other in an elevated way. My team knows that I love to use the word elevated. We have to elevate our work in support of the alumni community, but we have to elevate the engagement of our alumni community if we're going to support our students, if we're going to support our alumni in the way that we need to more consistently as we move forward. What I would love to do is get more into a conversation. I think Sarah gave me about this much time to make my initial comments. But I hope that you see my excitement for engaging you in our work to meet the diverse needs of our alumni population and to continue to build our community in a way that really does create energy and consistency across our alumni networks and alumni communities that continues to build upon itself as we move forward. I'm excited about the work we're doing. I'm thrilled to have you all as partners in that work. And I'm looking forward to working with you over the years to come as we build out a new engagement model for our alumni community. Sarah, I know there were a few questions maybe that came in advance, and we could start there or open it up, whatever you think is best.
Yes. Thank you, Josh. Yes, I want to give everyone a moment to type in what's on your mind in the chat area, and I will go ahead and ask that to Josh. But something I know that was asked in advance, Josh, is can you talk about Emory's response to what's going on the racial justice, social justice conversations and some efforts underway?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I'm proud of I know Steve's on the call, Steve, our EAB president. And we have been talking for the last year and a half since I returned to Emory about the work that needs to be done around diversity, equity, and inclusion and our work with our alumni communities. I know that as the board's 2020 project, I believe that was the name, Steve, the 2020 board project where they really reconstituted the alumni board, paring down into 3 committees, they began to focus on various task forces. And one of those initially is planned, again, this is last fall, to be around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it was at that point that Carol Henderson, if that's not a name you know, you should, Dr. Carol Henderson joined Emory last August as our Vice Provost for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion. She has been a fantastic partner to me and to our division. She spoke at our divisional meeting last fall. We were one of the first divisions to have her in, and we are partnering with her work. I know that Steve and other members of the alumni board met with her, and she has asked us to align our work to work they're doing in their office and giving her time to get her feet on the ground. But there is certainly engagement between our work and her work that is underway. I was also proud back in March, right as or before we went into our COVID lockdown, as I was making some staff changes, Marche, who had been on our Sarah's team, was elevated to be the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Programs within the Alumni Association. So our ability to be responsive even several months ago was in large part due to Marche's work and her role and ability to be very responsive. I believe we were putting on programs with very important content within days of some of the first incidents, and our alumni community certainly expressed their gratitude for our quick response and for how we were engaging them in that work. I hope if you haven't seen that you will look at the letter our new president sent out 2 days ago, yesterday. Everything's happening so fast. There was a letter from 2 different student groups. A group of our student organization signed a letter to the president, and there were also a group of Black students who signed a letter to the president asking for certain things to be addressed. And he sent out a wonderful communication yesterday that talked about everything from our legacy with slavery and a conference that we're going to do that we did 10 years ago, that we're going to have an additional conference next year celebrating the 10-year anniversary of the first one to again address and discuss some of those issues, to policing, to building namings. And I have also been working with Carol around scholarships. We're looking at all of the scholarships that we have established within our area through philanthropy, and looking at how those scholarships are being utilized and how they can be better utilized to support the needs of our diverse student population and to continue to address the need to provide greater diversity within our student populations. There was also in that letter a commitment to renovate spaces that serve our diverse student needs. And what some of you will know is the AMUC, the Alumni Memorial University Center, which is now the AMUC again, that the duck has been pulled off of the AMUC. So there is a commitment to a lot of that in his letter, and will continue to be addressed, I am certain, over the coming year. A lot of conversation about this can't just be a discussion, there has to be action. I hope that we are taking the right kind of actions within our division, and will continue to, and want to hear from our alumni community about the things that they would like to see. But I certainly believe that our new president is committed to addressing the needs that the students have brought forward within the student population.
Okay, all right, great. And Josh, in this virtual environment, you talked a lot about how we need our volunteer leaders to be advocates for us and ambassadors. So what are some ways you see that taking place already in the virtual environment that you would encourage everyone on the line to do?
Well, Sarah, you and I haven't rehearsed this, so I hope I don't put more work on your plate. But again, as I was saying earlier, I think anything we can do to lean in and supporting our students, and I mean all of our students across all of our schools right now, would be important. And I want everyone to come together in terms of our alumni volunteers, our school and unit boards, our chapters, our affinity groups, and they can lean in the ways that their affinity groups support various communities. But I would love to see us reaching out to students, both on campus, because it's going to be an isolating environment, to those that are at home in their bedrooms, trying to do classes online and feeling maybe disconnected from the Emory community, that are looking, that weren't able to take study abroad trips or do research projects this summer, that are concerned about internships and will there be an opportunity next summer and how will they go about finding those opportunities. So many ways I feel that the alumni community can be a part of both our students. And then of course you have to think about those that will be applying this fall to join us next fall, and what a different experience that's going to be. They may not be able, they probably won't be able to come to campus and tour campus. So how do we support our student communities? And I would say we're going to have lots of ideas, and we are open to all ideas that you as volunteers can bring forward in terms of reaching out and really being proactive in supporting our students, knowing the challenges, the multitude of challenges that we're going to face this fall.
Yeah. Well,
Sarah, are some of those things already being put in place by your team in terms of outlets to connect into those activities?
yes, absolutely. I think thankfully Josh's charge for our team then goes along nicely with, I think, what we're hearing from volunteers as well, that they would like more outlets to support students. And we see a lot of that happening in the career space, in the admission space. So we want to make that more accessible as well. And we will certainly be working more closely with campus to do that and make sure it's not just an option for Atlanta alumni. That also segues nicely into the next question, Josh, about how one of Emory's top attributes is our demonstrated compassion for students. And now what are we doing to adjust our financial support given the change in financial need from students, and how can alumni be helpful there?
Yeah, I mean, that's something we're talking a lot about. And obviously Kevin just asked about the financial position of the university. I like to talk about Emory as one Emory because we are one community, and yet we know within Emory there's Emory University and Emory Healthcare, and the impacts and ways that COVID has hit the university are certainly different within those sides. The healthcare system has seen tremendous losses because in mid-March, they stopped all elective surgeries and really focused in on COVID until late June. They started back some elective surgeries and then have had to pull back on that as the increase in cases has elevated in late July and into August. I can tell you that I know the healthcare system is, our fiscal year ends the end of this month, but our healthcare system is looking at losses in the several hundred millions of dollars. The university, similarly to that point, is looking at and the last I heard was an $85 million loss on the university side. We have put in cuts in terms of there's hiring freezes, and we've got a number of positions in our division that will sit empty for at least the next year. Another reason we're going to need to lean into our volunteers. But I think one of the things that I know one of the things that we've committed ourselves to is to supporting and increasing financial aid during this period to meet the needs of our students. The university froze tuition to 2020 rates. So the board, all the yearly increases that you hear about have been frozen. And they have also, back in the fall, the Board of Trustees approved a $5 million emergency fund to support student needs. And I know Inku said that there were Inku, our Dean of Students, said that we had over 6,000 requests between the initial announcement of that in April and last count in August, over 6,000 requests from students. And they had expended $2.5 million of the initial $5 million to support everything from flying students home who didn't have the resources to providing emergency support to students. So that will continue, Sarah, as we move into the new year. And of course, on our side, as we've already been focused on scholarship, our efforts will be elevated around continuing to provide scholarship support. You know, as everyone talks about Emory's endowment, as those of you who understand endowments know that endowments are restricted. If you give me a gift for X, I can't use it for Y. Emory College is 92% of the financial aid provided by Emory comes from our operating budget. So we are heavily a tuition dependent school. So good news, bad news is that, you know, the endowment at 8% of endowment income supports financial aid, that we are not significantly impacted by market shifts because such a smaller portion of our endowment, of our financial aid is supported by endowment. So that will continue to be an effort on the fundraising side, certainly. But it will continue to be a challenging year. And depending on what happens with spring semester, those issues could only get worse in terms of financial impact that we're gonna see. And Isam, yes, $85 million on the university budget for fiscal 20, the fiscal year we're about to end, is the loss that they're anticipating at fiscal year end close.
Okay, thank you for those details. All right, Susan Schlein, I know you've had your hand up for a while, so I want to call on you.
Hi,
Susan. And then we'll go back to the chat questions.
Hi, Josh. I'm in the middle of eating lunch. So you know me. I know Josh knows me.
I do.
And I'm very involved here in Houston in alumni interviewing, college fairs, okay, and recruiting the next best class for Emory. So I have contacts in the alumni office. She's on maternity leave now, and contacts in the admissions office. And I work with these people because when I was on the Emory College Alumni Board, one of the pilots that I wanted to do, which I continue to do, is reaching out to early decision 1 and early decision 2 students here in Houston. Well, I met my early decision 1s, and COVID kind of threw a monkey wrench in my early decision 2 visits. We also, between my husband and I, do college fairs in our area in Houston. So I've been in touch with the young lady who has Houston as her territory in admissions, and was told that basically this year alumni are not going to be utilized in college fairs. And she wasn't sure whether she was going to be going to college fairs. And I'm not sure whether they're going to have college fairs. But be that as it may, I have a lot of trouble. I would like to be able to reach out. I know students who are living here in Houston who are telecommuting to class. I have no way of getting in touch with them. I don't know. I know names, but I have no emails, no phone numbers to buck them up, because I can't get this information out of admissions. And I understand their privacy thing, and the students you have on campus are basically adults now. They're 18, okay? But is there some way, if we want to honestly reach out to the students in our vicinity and offer them support, offer them a shoulder to cry on or whatever, that we can get their information? Because, you know, this to me is where it's breaking down.
Yeah, Susan, I mean, clearly we're going to have to find ways to look at that. In fact, Cutler, I'm going to call on you. Cutler attended a PQUAD meeting, which is alumni leaders within our peer set of schools. And they were talking about alumni interviewing, and this is pre-COVID, and how they had moved to, of all things, Zoom alumni interviewing and student engagement. We have about 1,500 alumni participate in alumni interviewing on an annual basis every fall. And when I talk about alumni engagement, I talk about scalability all the time. How do we go from 1,500 people doing alumni interviewing to 5,000? What are the programs that not will just bring 50 more alumni into an engagement with the university, but how can we get many, many more alums engaging with the university? And Cutler, I believe it was Notre Dame, had implemented Zoom alumni interviewing and had over 5,000 of their alums participating.
That's correct. Yeah, they do it. Duke does it. Many of the other schools actually implemented it a little bit while ago. So they do a hybrid. So they offer both in person and virtual. Given the fact that not all students are located where there is an alum nearby who did do the interview, we were always joking about, you know, if you a student who lives in Murphy, North Carolina, you may not have an alum nearby. And so we want to make sure everybody has access to that. So we're working on a plan right now to expand that program, working closely with admission around that.
And Cutler, you have met with admissions about the ability to kind of implement that type of technology into our system to address what Susan just talked about, even if it's setting up Zoom links with students so that we're able to get direct access between alumni and student, correct?
That is correct.
And Josh, as the co-chair here in Houston for alumni interviewing, before Annie went on maternity leave and turned her alumni interviewing over to someone else in the alumni office, she did say that because of COVID, it will be virtual this year.
Yep.
You know, I'm assuming you could still offer somebody a face-to-face interview, but I'm not comfortable going someplace like Starbucks or Panera Bread. So, I mean, you know, if I can do a Zoom, that's great.
Yeah, I think it'll be Zoom. But this is a great example of how I think technology in this time is something that we're going to use differently as we move forward. Because I think Zoom programming, interviewing is going to be an elevated part of our work as we move forward. Engaging with alums, layered in with in-person events and activities once we're able to return to those.
Yeah,
Absolutely. All right. So, and this is certainly a theme that my team is noting, and we are already working on ways to make it more accessible to campus, but this will continue being something I know you all want to work on. So Josh, transitioning, we do have some alumni, some international alumni on the line today. Thank you for joining us. They'd like to know how this will impact international admissions this year and potential scholarships to international students.
Yeah, certainly. And Katie, I don't know if you have more specific information on that, but I do know, obviously, the concern around admissions is broad. And I will say, to Susan's point, between our campus life staff and our admission staff, they've been overwhelmed this summer, just trying to retain the class and get the class moved in this weekend. Everybody's holding their breath that we don't have a lot of loss this year, obviously around international travel at our students. Oxford, which has recently had an increasing international population, I know they were expecting the biggest drop off this year because of a loss of international students who had planned to come, who are not going to come now. So I think that we're going to have to be very thoughtful about our international work, hoping that we may have to do double duty after the first of the year if things open up a little bit. But Katie, do you have any more specific information about what's being done in that regard? Katie, by the way, is on our team in advancement alumni engagement and oversees our international outreach and efforts.
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, I mean, I think really the biggest concerns are the number of students who have deferred. There are a number of students who are trying to do remote learning, and I actually was on campus yesterday and met with some parents who were able to come, and interestingly, it's very anecdotal, but every single parent that I'm meeting and the students are actually US citizens. So they're living in other countries, and so they're able to get here, at least, again, anecdotally, the ones who I'm seeing primarily are because it was easy for them to get here because they were traveling on US passports. So it's the students who don't have US citizenship, either don't have a parent who's American or weren't born here, that are really having a difficult time. And so we're seeing a lot of students defer. So I think it'll be interesting to see what the impact is next year. We have seen some diminished admission numbers from certain countries. In Asia, for example, there had been a little bit of a drop off in China, students actually looking at European countries over some of the US destinations. But we still were seeing really good numbers before COVID. So I think it'll just be, kind of time will tell. But the visa issues really had a huge impact this year.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And now, Josh, I'm also going to call upon you, as well as Steve Greenfield, president of our Emory Alumni Board, who's also representing in his role on the board of the Emory Entrepreneur Network in Atlanta. So he wears many hats. We have a question about the Emory Alumni Board and its recent restructure. Board 2020 was a big project, and how we see the board better partnering with the Emory networks. So I don't know, who wants to speak first?
I'll let Steve start.
All right, sure, great. Well, hey everybody, and thanks for joining on a Saturday. It's really great to see everybody and a lot of familiar faces. The Board 2020 work, as Josh mentioned, started three years ago probably, so well in advance of actually the year 2020 in preparation for a change. I think we had recognized at the time that our structure hadn't changed for about 10 years. And 10 years prior had gone through a pretty dramatic restructuring of the board just to make sure that it was addressing needs of the alumni and the school. And we did a lot of introspection. We surveyed our board, we surveyed past board members, we talked to a lot of constituents across campus. And there were a few major changes, right? I think one of the things we found, and I think everyone can appreciate this, is as technology has evolved and people's work-life balances have evolved over time, it's getting increasingly hard to fly people into cities 4 times a year and have face-to-face meetings. So part of what we try to do is provide more flexibility with using tools like Zoom to have sort of virtual meetings, which would allow us to actually have more frequent meetings, but less of a burden flying people in. So we went from a quarterly cadence of having people fly into Atlanta to just having 2 physical meetings per year and complemented by 2 virtual meetings. And there was a lot of committee meetings interspersed. The second major thing was we had, as Josh said earlier, multiple standing committees. I think there were 5 or 6 standing committees. And we were finding in some cases, and I hate to admit it, but the perception was there wasn't enough work to be done by those committees. So we were kind of making work for the committees. And as a result, we were suffering from a lack of engagement from some of our EAB members. So what we switched to, as Josh said, we sort of collapsed down the work into 3 committees. So everyone has to be a member of one of the committees. So all of our EAB members have to be a member of one of the committees. But then we allow the flexibility of having these time-bound, shorter task forces that could be more focused on rolling up our sleeves and getting things done. And that so far has worked very, very well. Because we've had a few task forces, and you can drive high degrees of engagement. You can have a very time-bound, short-scoped projects, and get folks who otherwise haven't been engaged in their committee work very engaged in this task force work. And then the last thing, and I think this was largely driven from me, I came off of 9 years at the Goizueta Alumni Board, 2 of which as president, and I really appreciated a slightly smaller audience. When I first started to attend EAB members, and for those of you on the call that have been EAB members, are EAB members, or have attended EAB meetings, I walked into a room and there were like 50 people there. And I was like, wow, this is kind of crazy. trying to engage 50 people during a few-hour meeting was very, very hard. And I found you know, the 50 folks in the room were largely passively receiving information, weren't able to really log and debate, which I found in a group of 21 at the Goizueta Alumni Board, we were able to really like out and debate meeting. I'm a fan of making sure that people's voices can be heard and you know that they can challenge each other, et cetera. So we've gone with that to a smaller board, and at full complement, I think we're at 35 members total, which I think is just better in general when we have meetings, whether it's a Zoom meeting like this or a face-to-face meeting, having a smaller venue. So all the we did a lot of introspection to make sure, one, we're still being relevant, you know, to make sure, two, that we were able to be the sounding board and the voice and the representative of 150,000 alumni out there. And so far, it's sort of an experiment that we launched last year, but it seems to be working well. I think we'll always be in a mode of kind of tweaking and making sure that we can optimize the structure of the board, what we focus on, and making sure that we are not only engaging our EAB members, but also just being a better representative body of the 150,000 alumni who are out, you know, across the US, but now increasingly globally represented. And Josh, I don't think there's anything else that I missed in there.
Yep, I will say, I do just want to call out the committee that Steve sits on, that's chaired by Elizabeth Halkos, one of our volunteers, is focused on supporting the efforts of the Emory networks. So we've been bringing them information about you all already, and we'll continue to do so. And we are launching a mentor program for the first time between the EAB and the Emory networks, which will be, I think, a great way for them to understand how they can support your challenges. Okay, so any final questions before Josh goes off the line?
I have a question.
Yes, Steve.
So Josh, what's you've got a lot of folks here represented from a lot of different countries and across the US. If there's one thing that we could be doing that was like top of mind for us as advocates, champions, representatives, kind of put you on the spot maybe, but what's the one thing we should be focusing most of our efforts on really to help the school right now?
Yeah, I mean, Steve, I'm going to be consistent here. So that's going to be an easy one in that regard. But I would say lean in to our work around engaging with our current students and those who apply. I mean, you know, I think about all that we're doing. We're all exhausted. I mean, we saw an uptick in alumni engagement initially because of Zoom activities. We actually had alumni who hadn't engaged with us in years, engaging in programming and other things. And you've seen the Zoom that we're all experiencing as we have a 3-hour Saturday Zoom meeting. But, you know, I would almost say if everyone on this call and then you charge the groups that each of you respectively worked with, I mean, I think of once a week, I mean, literally once a week, if you could reach out to a student, right, and be part of that engagement, the impact and power that that would have in building the kind of community we're talking about would be transformative, right? I mean, absolutely transformative. So I think, as I think about Sarah and her team and the work that they're going to do, is really facilitating that work with our alumni volunteers, right? Is making sure, as Susan said earlier, that it's not a problem of getting the information to be in touch, but that we're providing the outlet and the conduit. And if everybody, like I said, if you said once a week, I'm going to reach out to a student at Emory, an applicant this year, and challenge the networks that each of you respectively are part of, it would have a transformative impact on our culture.
Great, thank you.
All right, wonderful. Well, Josh, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate it. And we are about to go on, we're about to turn it over to Cutler Andrews. If anyone needs a break, we can take a quick break since we're ahead of schedule. Just come back here in a few minutes, and then we'll get started with Cutler Andrews talking about engagement, communications, and marketing. Thank you, Josh.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for all you do.
Bye.
Okay.
Okay, so 3-minute break, and then we will get to the next talk.
Oh, he wanted to eat.
Okay. All right, I think we can go ahead and get started after that quick break. So I will now turn it over to Cutler Andrews, who you obviously just heard speak a bit in that last session. Cutler is the Senior Associate Vice President for Engagement, Communications, and Marketing. So he's here today to talk to us about how we're going to optimize the Emory alumni experience, since you heard Josh talk about the larger vision for where we're headed. Cutler, thanks for being here.
It's my pleasure. And like I was telling Sarah, I always hate following Josh because he's very articulate and elegant in kind of how he talks about the overall alumni experience at Emory. But there's kind of a lot of different nuances that go into it. And so I'm probably going to focus more on the communications and marketing side of everything here. So what I want to do is kind of give you a quick overview of what the group looks like. So the group of engagement communications marketing is a newly formed group. We kind of came together right at the beginning of the pandemic, so right when we were going out. So unfortunately, as a team, we have not physically been able to get together in one space. But it has been pretty impressive how kind of this newly formed team has come together, even in this virtual environment, to really rethink the way that we're working. So overall, the group is made up of about 7 different teams. The first is the, we call it AAE events team. So the advancement and alumni engagement events team, who put on, or were putting on a lot of the in-person events, the larger scale events around the country. They put on homecoming, they put on events around Founders Week. They would do Emory Engages, Insights and Innovation. And so right now they're kind of pivoting over to a really virtual events team. So how do we leverage that team to make what we've been doing via WebEx or Zoom into more of an engaging virtual experience? We also have the advanced communications team, the regional engagement and volunteer management team, which Sarah Rawls leads, the leadership engagement programs team, Laurie, who leads that one. There's constituent giving and donor relations, which is under Lisa Tillman. There's constituent analytics, which is a new team. It's been around a little bit over a year now under Molly Smith, and the ECM operations team under Francis Stanfield. Michael Kloss leads the events team on the front end of that. So when we were kind of thinking holistically around what this group would look like and how we build this team out, really what we wanted to focus on, and this is not the vision, like a true vision statement per se, but this is kind of how we were looking to really build this. So build a personalized, meaningful, and transformative constituent experience model that leads to exponential increase in the lifelong engagement of our Emory alumni and broader constituents. That's a pretty big charge, but we wanted to have something that was a little bit of a true north for us, to be able to focus in on when we take on a new activity or look at a new strategy, does it line up with that vision? And really focusing on these kind of 4 key areas around, how do we look at our communications? How do we offer kind of meaningful engagement experiences? How do we create a culture of engagement where people feel more connected overall, and it drives that connectivity? But also, how do we steward that? We often talk about stewardship in terms of giving, but we have to talk about stewardship in terms of larger volunteerism, is to make sure that when you're doing AIP and you're leading a network, that we do our job in making sure that you understand how much we appreciate that and how much it means to Emory and our students. So when we looked at kind of breaking that down even more, again, I promise I will not read through all of these slides. That's one of the things I do my best. I always struggle not to do. I feel like you all can see them and can read them. But really, if we break these down, it is talking about consistent and relevant communications. Like, how do we make sure when we are communicating with you that it is meaningful, it's clear, it feels personalized, it feels tailored. Also, how do we make sure that we really expand and support a really robust volunteer community that you all are a part of? I mean, we have a lot of staff, but we are not able to really provide that kind of one-to-one meaningful direct communications and experiences without a really robust volunteer network. I often talk about our work, and Kevin Kell knows this really well, about Williams. I did work with Williams as a consultant before coming to Emory, and they have 1,200 volunteers. Well, they also have 30,000 alums. So they have a really robust program that has led to this deep, meaningful engagement there. But also, how are we looking at kind of those ongoing opportunities for people to be engaged? Like, are they actually the right opportunities? Are we making sure that we're matching what we're building up with what people are really looking for and what is meaningful for them? And then we look at, again, those experiences. Do they feel a tailored experience? Do they feel like when you come here that, this is actually what interests me, this is meaningful for me? And also, when we talk about things that we send them out, it's the right opportunity at the right time. So we offer a lot of different experiences, opportunities to be engaged. And we have this constant discussion internally around, all right, do we let everybody know about everything that we are doing? Or how do we actually tailor that so, at some point in life, you actually, may be more interested in kind of career services or different types of career services, or that you're at the point where you're probably interested in being a mentor, but making sure that those things are driven by your interests and your past behavior and the ways that you've interacted with us. And then talking about stewardship, that makes sure that when we think about that it talks about the impact you're having, but it also builds a retention model for us. So we're not trying to always having to rebuild this from the base up. The other thing that we work really hard on is try to track all of these engagement points. So when we want to build out a robust data analytics model, and this is something that Steve and I have talked a lot about, is that how do we track all of this? We know so much about our constituents, but in many cases we don't act like we know anything about them. And that means, like, we know their degrees, what their interests are, we know events they've come to, if they've supported us philanthropically, what areas they supported that way. In many cases, we know emails you've opened up, what you've looked at. And we have data in so many different locations. I think the last count I had is we have 8 different data sources. So we have to pull all that data out and put it into a data warehouse to do enhanced analytics on it. So it's not easy, but we just need to make sure we're using it. And that leads to the bottom, is actually how do we take all of that data and do it into an enhanced model. So that is a really, really high level overview of where we are. and kind of the structure. What I want to talk a little bit about is, as we think through strategy, and we, try to make decisions on where we're going and what we need to do, we have to pause a bit and really think about what is the landscape beyond Emory. I'll ask Sarah, if you wouldn't mind putting in the chat the link to Josh's video that he did for the Ever True conference. And so the images on the left side, or I guess my left side, depending on which, will make a lot more sense once you've seen the video. But Josh talks about really what is the chatter that's out there around higher education. There are questions around, is higher education worth it? There are misperceptions when it comes to universities and colleges reaching out, asking to be engaged or support them philanthropically. And we oftentimes, and Josh talks about, we oftentimes ignore those messages. We build our strategy because we know we're valuable and we know what the intrinsic value of higher education is, and especially Emory's educational experience. But we also have to realize that there are large cohorts that are listening to other narratives, and we have to think about, okay, well, how do I acknowledge that narrative? And we talk about student debt. I mean, depending on where you look for numbers, but one of the latest numbers I found was $1.56 trillion in student debt. There are over 44 million people are borrowers of student loan debt in our country, with average debt of $32,000. And when you have that, and we're trying to make the case for, especially on the philanthropic side, that's something that we have to acknowledge. And we also know that people may be paying their student debt off for years. I talked about it myself. I'm still paying off my graduate loans right now when I think about my alma mater's UNC. And so if I'm doing that, what is the value? What is an ongoing value? As I write that check, or actually have a direct deposit every month of that money, do I feel like my alma mater is still providing me value? And yes, the further as you get, that kind of concept and perception shifts a little bit. But when we also kind of look at some other stats, so the Education Advisory Board, EAB, puts out some really interesting data around this. So they've done some research about, 45% of alumni under 35 disagree that their alma mater values their relationship with them. And that's tough. Like at Emory, we haven't asked that question specifically, but if I look at some of the other data around it, it's not many of our alums, the majority of our alums are not satisfied with their alumni experience with Emory. And that's something that we have to sit with, and we have to reflect on the why is that. And we have to listen to some tough conversations around that to make sure that when we think about what we're doing, we are planning from an outside in perspective, using the design thinking methodology around empathy to understand what we are doing to build those things out. But we also have to realize that there is so much information that it is flowing at people. And that is really difficult. So all the noise that comes in, I had a conversation yesterday with Chris Arundel, who is on our board. And he is kind of a guru in email marketing and set things up in Salesforce Marketing Cloud. And we talked about when we sent emails and IP warming, all of this stuff that we didn't really think about when we sent out a direct mail piece or a brochure that we now have to think about to rise above the noise. So what happens is we also know that people ignore our communications. If we think about our alumni population, we have over 150,000 alums. When we look at who we can actually email, that number goes down to around 90,000. So that means there's a large cohort of people who don't ever even receive our digital communications, which we are leaning into more heavily than we have ever have before. And then you look at an average open rate of that, which is going to be around, between 26 to 34%, that there's just a lot of people who are just ignoring what we're putting out there. And we see that in some of the feedback that we're getting back. We also have what is going on around us this year. And there's kind of a hybrid internal, external of how this all has affected us. But I mean, Josh and I were talking last night because we've been really excited around President Bendis. And those who follow him on Twitter He's been more active on social. The communication he's pointing out, he's really leaning into communication with alumni. And that is a key priority of his. We were, and again, you hate to lament on what you can't have, but we were talking about how great it would have been. We had a great plan to kind of roll him out and, you know, into the Atlanta area, around the country, and it would have been so much fun. But we hit all of these other things that have just happened. And that we have to make sure that, you know, we can't ignore, they're there. You know, we have COVID. Those with that, a 7-year-old and a 10-year-old, I'm trying to figure out in a week, how am I gonna, my wife and I both work full time and have them in virtual learning and doing it effectively. And so I know that pressures that's there. All of kind of the increase in awareness of the movement around racial justice and a broadening of the conversation that we've been needing to have for years is rising up. And so how do we talk about that? And what is our role in that? And then just looking at employment rates and what's happening to the economy, all of that stuff are things that we have to be mindful of. And also, I mean, you all are very aware, we've had a lot of transition at Emory. We had our provost left to go become president at another university. President Sturck announced she was leaving in the fall. We lost one of our kind of most famed deans at the business school. And that led to kind of a shake in confidence. And we heard it loud and clear. And we will fully own, we've had a lot of conversations on the alumni board around, we just did not communicate well during that time. And so as part of that kind of social contract, we didn't hold up our end of the bargain about how we need to make sure that we show our value to alums and how do we communicate that and make sure that you are in the loop around that. And we're seeing that in perceptions, we're seeing that declines in engagement and declines in giving, that hopefully we'll see an increase when we, again, work to right our ship a little bit. Okay, so I want to just share some data, and I'm sorry to kind of dive into this too much, but I do want you all to see, like, what is Emory looking like right now? So we're looking at just giving. And the reason why I put giving up there, I know we're talking a lot about engagement, but it is a subset of engagement. It also is an indicator around engagement, that both of those kind of influence each other. But we've seen a steadily decline. This is on par, honestly, with the national average though, because of some of the conversations we were having earlier around the perceptions around higher education, that, you know, we have a really large endowment that supports us so we don't need any money. All of that stuff is playing into this. And also our unwillingness to really change our behaviors in a significant way to match up with the different trends. Talk about engagement as well. So I mean, event as a kind of a subset of engagement is down. We've always leaned heavily into events. And now I think we're going to see a slightly different trend this year, because as we've leaned into virtual events, it's opened these things up to a wider variety of people who were never able to come before. We always have this resistance to, if we're doing it at a live event, do you offer a virtual option to it? I can guarantee as we come out of the COVID pandemic, our events and the way that we operate around this are going to look different. They should look different. Because we want to make sure that we are accessible to a wider audience. Mentorship is still a tough area for us. Our numbers are still low in this era. We have made some progress, and I think we continue to make progress. We added, I think the last number I saw was around 2,600 new members to Emory Connects, which is great, because that is an area for people to support other alums, to support our students. But we just had a conversation yesterday around, you know, how we're making sure that we are elevating the awareness around those career service offerings, the mentorship offerings, and so forth. Again, volunteer participation. We're just kind of stagnating here. Right? We're not, we're growing, we're going in the right direction. And I think the effort that I have seen kind of with the overall team to really around this area has been phenomenal. We know we have more work to do. And so part of like the conversation today is us to kind of talk to you about some of the things that we're doing, but also hear some of the things that we need to continue to do to make sure that we can make this a meaningful experience and we can help expand it to a broader audience. And then committee membership, it continues to decrease as well. Now we have to figure out, is that the right way? Is it because that's not how people want to be involved, or we don't have the right ways to work on this? I think there's a broader discussion to be had here about how people want to be involved. Okay, so let me roll right into a little work that we did. And I'm going to give full credit to this to Steve Greenfield, is because one of the first things I heard from him before I even met Steve was really around the need to lean into almost consumer-based marketing strategies and methodologies. And like thinking about, how do we look at data? How do we develop personas? And we took all of that and we decided to work with a local firm called Ideas United. Ideas United is Dan Costa and David Romer are Goizueta grads. They started the company while they were working at Emory. Kind of came up with this thing called Campus Movie Fest. And it's been a really interesting process for us to work through, is that we kind of had this overarching multi-dimensional research strategy to kind of get us on the front end to a better understanding. So actually kind of have us hear more of what that experience was. We have been doing alumni research surveys for years, but they're anonymous. So you can't necessarily when you look at it, you can get really high level information, but we can't drill down it the same way. And so the way that we structured this was, it was not anonymous survey. So every answer that was made, we can link right back to a record. And that gave us additional level of data. So we had 4,700 responses. On the front end of that, we talked about kind of this regression cluster analysis that we did to really develop these kind of other ideas. We coupled that with the responses and then some in-depth interviews. So a really comprehensive three-pronged data approach to this to build out on the front end as we think about the understanding of our alums. And some of you have probably seen some of this data, so I apologize for the repetitive nature of it, but I do want to make sure that I give you kind of a high level overview of kind of some of the things we learned from this. So if we look at kind of some key takeaways, is that we actually, with our relationship with our alums, we start pretty well. And it does kind of fall off over time. And there's a number of reasons for that. And we often talk here about kind of a lack of a clear brand identity at Emory. It's not something that people we lean into. You go into the student stores and there's not one clear Emory thing that's in there. It's kind of all over the place. People don't really know about the engagement opportunities. That is that's on communications for us to make sure that we are communicating that out in a relevant way. Some people say it's just kind of hard. It's hard to be engaged. We don't make it easy. There may be multiple platforms for somebody to log into depending on what you're actually doing. You don't really know how to do it. You come to the website and the user experience is all kind of convoluted. All of those things that we became really aware of, and we listened to that feedback and we're starting to develop strategies to move that forward. And we talked a lot about communications. And I think that was one of the biggest areas that we saw, is that it wasn't a lack of programs, it was a lack of awareness around the programs. I think our alumni engagement team has done an incredible job of really building out meaningful experiences, and in many cases, but a lot of people just didn't know about them. So when we look at it, I don't know if I want to say all negative and be doom and gloom, because really are positives here. There was a strong desire for Emory to be better. And that's what we hear over and over and over again, is that I believe Emory can be better. I want Emory to be better. I feel like we have all the things here that could drive some of this. So when we talked about with their experience at Emory, 87% were very satisfied, or at least somewhat satisfied with their experience at Emory. And they also talked about kind of how valuable it was in their long-term kind of career pathing. And so those are key things. If you look at metrics at universities across the board, we did a study I was at a company a couple of years ago called Ruffalo and Levitt, and we did a study on satisfaction rates, how they correlate with engagement and giving rates, and it's this obvious correlation. We always often joke that young alumni giving is kind of like a satisfaction survey for your student experience. And these hold true, but Then we also said only 41% were very satisfied or satisfied with their alumni experience. So that's where there's a drop off. Like we oftentimes we don't ever ask if they are satisfied with that holistic experience. And so for us to be able to say, okay, well, you know what, we have a really large cohort. So, 59% say they're not satisfied with that experience. Okay, then we need to take that in and understand kind of what that ultimately means. We do see though, people want to be involved, and they're talking about ways to be involved, whether it's events or interviews or mentorship or regional outreach. And it talks to, we pulled some quotes. So there are very few opportunities for engagement, which is weird. Tell me more. It's like, there's so many options for engagement. So it talks about, we just haven't let people know, or we've had a barrier for entry that is so high. So alumni interviewing is a great example. And the team has been working on this for years, trying to allow a virtual option. And the virtual option will not only allow us to reach more prospective students, but have more alumni who are able to participate in that as well. There's a big gap between volunteering and willingness to volunteer. So we see a lot of people who are very willing to volunteer, but they don't. So how do we make sure that once they have raised their hand and said, I am willing to be a volunteer, that we help kind of curate an experience that meets that. Again, another example, when people are just not aware of those opportunities, or if they're not even aware of the opportunities, then they feel like they aren't really being asked to participate in those. They feel like they're having to do the work to go out and do it. And the staff will tell you that that's not true. We are asking, but when we do it on mass scale is where, when you have so many divergent forms of communication and so much noise coming in, we oftentimes miss the ask and the opportunities. We talked about the experience being somewhat cumbersome to come in. So how do we think about the digital user experience to sign up for something? What is that? I often talk about this as akin to what would be a customer experience model at, I use Sephora. One of my colleagues always talks about Sephora, and they feel like they know everything about her end to end, or Nordstrom. They pride themselves in that experience. How do we curate that same thing? They talk about the lacking of the brand, and I know Lisa mentioned about we're not a D1 school. We don't have the big athletics to pull people back in. And there's that not kind of that firming sense of school spirit, which is interesting because the schools who have the highest alumni participation rates in the country are D3 schools. But we sit in this kind of strange, tier 1 research school where a lot of our peers like Duke and Vanderbilt and do have that. And there is a bond that brings people back together. We often talk about there's not a strong sense of tradition, a singular tradition that spans the years. When I think about my time at UNC, I have an image that always comes into mind, which is the old well. My dorm looked out over the old well, the pictures of the old well in the snow, the azaleas blooming. They talk about the Carolina Way. That is pervasive. We don't have the same pervasiveness in traditions, and so we talk about that. It doesn't mean it can't be created. We are seeing crossover, kind of like crossovers becoming more steep for people. Dually for certain, for undergraduates, it's something that actually probably has one of the longest standing traditions. We've talked a lot about that. But you're right, there is an inherent challenge in that. So how do we acknowledge that challenge, but then work to take a different approach to it? I promise I'll stop talking in a second, and because there's just a lot of things to that we're collectively working on. So when I think about the holistic projects, these aren't all of them, but these are many things that we've undertaken over the past year. And as we look through a kind of I would call a kind of a transformative FY21, where we're really looking at more strategic planning and alignment to have a strong launch in 22. A couple things that we're doing. So we're transitioning from kind of an antiquated email platform called iModules over to Salesforce Marketing Cloud. That is a really a robust system that will allow us to do more personalization. It'll allow us to create pathways. So, and by that, I mean, if I send Sarah Rawls an email out of a whole group and Sarah clicks on the email, that may actually lead, and she doesn't take an action, sign up for mentoring, that may actually lead to her receiving a reminder email automatically without us having to manually pull the list and be mindful of that. Or we can also start developing content that is region specific. So instead of us having, so when we do regional newsletters now, we have to build from the ground up individual emails and HTML and I modules. And it takes a ton of time to do it.
These volunteers are quite familiar, so I just want to say this is,
yes,
excited about this.
Yeah. So, and we're trying to figure out, I was saying, well, how do we make it feel like every region it feels curated? So if we can pull from AWA that you're in New York, it'll come up there. So we're also about to rebuild for the website, the kind of the overall AAE website from the ground up. And we're probably looking at a phase 1 launch of January. It's a pretty big undertaking. As you think about the amount of information that's on our site, you can give there, you can sign up to volunteer, you can find career services. We're leaning into a ton more content. How do we provide educational information? We're talking about kind of increase in data analytics. We've redesigned the content hub. So if folks have seen what's called the Emory Collective, we're trying to curate all content into one space that you can search. So if you're interested in theology programs, you can look at the top and filter that down. Again, that'll get overhauled even again with the new website, but we felt like it was an important thing to push into right now. We're also looking at kind of redesigning the career site as well around that. Expanded virtual experiences, the personas, which I'll get into in one sec. Increasing investment in our career service tools. We know that is going to be that's a huge, and in the survey, that was one of the people look to us to provide. Even now, it's even more important. How do we expand our regional strategy? We talk always about how are we making sure that we are supporting our alumni across the globe, and making sure that there are strong kind of those regional, you have support in place, and that is a area that we know we need to do better in. So what are the tools we need to provide there? And really an increased focus on diversity and inclusion. I mean, we have, are our boards reflective of a broader alumni community? Are our programs reflective of the interests of a broader alumni community? Are we enabling people to have intellectual and sometimes difficult conversations that expand their horizons? Those are the things that we want to focus on in that area. Diversification of content in general. If you've seen a lot of content out on Emory Collective, it may look a little different than it used to, and making sure that we don't always do an hour-long webinar, but we provide you maybe a 5 to 10 minute video that you can watch that is more of a TED Talk style. And then expanded channel utilization. Somebody asked a question that I saw earlier around social media platforms. We have, there new ones come up all the time. You look at the ones that we manage. So we manage the Alumni Association pages. We've added, we have about 14,000 followers on Facebook. We started the year with 10,000 followers. So we've expanded that quite a bit, but still 14,000 followers, that's less than 10% of our overall alumni base who follow that. So we're looking at ways, how do we make sure we are getting more people back, because those are channels that are oftentimes like, we don't have to push everything out via email. It also enables us to do targeted social ads as well. So we can say, well, these group is interested in this. Instead of it blasting to everybody, there are things that are more targeted in that way. I'm going to give you a quick high level, because I talk a lot. You'll hear me talk about personas, and this is a big part of the IU project that we did. And at a high level, what a persona is, or how I think of a persona, is it helps me understand somebody's story of a larger group. It's an example of what what their likes and dislikes and what they're going through. So if I was a persona, I'm a mid-career professional who has young kids, and I'm worried about saving for college, and when I think about going out to different events, I want to make sure I have events I go to that my kids can be included in. I don't live near my alma mater anymore, but there is a desire for me to connect back with that group. And so I'm looking for opportunities to engage with that group in a way that also includes my family. So that is a really high level way to think about it, but it makes you think about, okay, well, how did I talk to that person? So, and in order to do this, this is where the data analysis, the survey and interviews came in. And what we did is from that, it led to what we call a cluster packet. And this was an enormous amount of data that we brought together. And there's stuff like, you know, wealth indicators, which just really a lot of times tells us some career where they are they married, are they out of state? And we had, I think 37 different cluster packets that we pulled together. And what we did is we took those, and there are all these different components to that. It tells us average age, the ratio of male to female in there, average number of children. Are there similar clusters that are out there as we think about commonalities across the board? And then we spent, this is when we could actually see each other in person. So I was looking at these pictures and I realized how much I miss these types of meetings. But this was right before we went out, and we got together and we had a mix of staff and volunteers and board members and faculty at Emory, and we talked through them. We looked at the numbers and we tried to narrow down the number that we could actually focus in on. And then from there, what we did is we actually developed kind of a story. So, you know, we had one called, you know, Andrew. He's a model with potential, and there's a lot of, we can get into the vernacular probably in another session, but really what it did, it made us think about Andrew. So what do we kind of know? And Andrew represents a really, really broad group of people. But the way that we often have segmented things is almost so simplistic that, like, okay, well, you live in New York. We're going to send you New York information. Or you're in New York in finance, we'll see that information. What we try to do is we try to dig a little bit deeper here and understand maybe what's going on in their lives. And this is how a traditional marketer would approach things. If I'm trying to sell, I'll probably use Steve, like if I'm trying to sell cars, I need to understand my customer, kind of what are they looking for? So I don't have just a generic message going out. And so we looked at kind of even types of communication. How often do you use direct mail? Do they want to be called? Do we want to text them? Do we want to do social? What are their motivations and frustrations and hobbies? And again, these are all examples, and it helps us start to think about our communication pathways. We did one, you know, for Lindsay is another one that we pulled together as well for this, and Lindsay's local. She's married with one kid. She's similar to some other clusters. She's a professional. What are the things in her life as we think about how we communicate, that we think about how to communicate with her? Michelle would be another one, young professional in Chicago. She doesn't have kids. She may be more interested in career path and networking. So those are kind of the broad strokes of how we did. And then we're starting to develop what we call journey maps. And it is taking somebody from disconnected to a nurture and connected. And it's an interesting kind of flow through. And for us to think about, okay, if they're disconnected, I can't expect them to be on a board or a network leader right away. I've got to make sure I'm providing them things that slowly kind of build that connectivity, because it's almost like dipping your toe in the water. I may try this, and however my experience happens, or however you communicate with me, may dictate whether I'm going to take the next step or not. But we have to be more thoughtful in that approach overall. I'm going to kind of stop here, but, you know, and one thing as we keep talking about, Josh talked a ton around the value of a strong volunteer program. You know, the one way we think a lot of things is that on the communication side, we are very much a one-to-many approach. We try to enable tools that do one-to-few, but we also try to develop this kind of network model out there, that there is a stronger sense of interconnectedness. And we think about us trying to manage and support a volunteer program. We have to make sure we're kind of, we have all the tools in place to kind of build that out collectively. So I'm going to stop there. If you have questions, so I've got a couple of, I can share the deck out. I'm happy to do that. I will let you know around the personas. There's a lot. So there's some kind of core stuff in there. We're still modifying them and changing them. We're actually building an internal site, and we're going to keep kind of pushing those and developing strategies against them. We're actually using them right now in some of our kind of end of the year pushes. We have talked a lot about them around career services, and we've been running some of our programs through to figure out where people sit in those. It's been pretty interesting. All right,
Okay.
I'll pause.
This is great, Color. And if you get rid of your screen, I'll spotlight your video. Oh, video is spotlighted. So Color,
Right.
highly informative, and I know volunteers, you all are great spokespeople for the changes that we need in our marketing and communication strategy. So I know many of you have been eagerly awaiting these advancements. We will be updating you throughout the year because this is an implementation process, and a lot of great work was started this past year, and we know that this upcoming year, we will see the new website. We will be using Salesforce Marketing Cloud and seeing iModules go away, and none of us will miss it. So lots more updates that we'll be sending you all throughout the year. And we are scheduling a training with Cutler's colleagues, Lindsay Miles and Venus Austin, to talk to you all more about the day-to-day strategy for regional networks. But Cutler, could you speak to that? That was one of the questions sent in, where you see the regional strategy through communications when we are embracing this global approach and we are offering more virtual activities. So it does change our value proposition a bit, though I think there's still a place for it. So, but I'll let you weigh in.
Yeah, this is those areas that I feel like before this, we were really leaning heavily into strong regional programs. And then, but even with that in mind, when we take the regional approach we were taking, it meant there were regions that we're not getting the same attention, that we couldn't cover everywhere. And now with the virtual, any program we do, we can offer to anybody. Anybody can dial into it. That does not mean we should not have kind of a virtual regional model. There's still, because part of it is even in this time that we're disconnected, we're not disconnected, that we cannot be physically close together. We want to make sure we're laying the groundwork when we can come back together, and that we will not always be in this environment. We will be able to come out of that and get together. So if we ignore that for these extended periods of time, we're not going to be able to create that network connection in the same way. And we talk a lot about how do you develop senses of community and connectivity when you're in a virtual world. I mean, there are ways. The way we're looking at homecoming right now, we're going to be using breakout rooms and lounges. We'll still have main stage events. But enabling groups to still connect in the same way. And we see it all the time now with like virtual happy hours or other kind of small, virtual book clubs. We can still, and we still should do that. A lot of this is there's no roadmap for any of this. And I think that's what we have to give ourselves a little bit of reprieve on, because we want to know the exact right thing to do right now. And we don't, because the last time this really happened this way was a long, long time ago, and they weren't having to deal with the same communication channels we were. So I think we're still working through it, but it is definitely a strong need for us to maintain that kind of network and geographical connectivity.
And I think we should also go back to your point that we have to be able to tag the information that we do receive so that we can do a better job reaching out to people based on interest versus you all doing some broad assumptions.
Yeah.
And Cutler, what are some of your ideas? Again, our colleague Venus will come talk to us about this later, but what are some of your ideas for using social media to drive engagement to networks? Because that's top of mind for these folks as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think social media is becoming more and more relevant. We have to be mindful of social media is still a communication channel. And I think oftentimes we post out and we look at it as a push communication, and social is really meant to be a two-way communication. If we're not actively engaging back and forth and responding, then we will not really build that strong connectivity there. But I still think it's a way for people to go highlight. It's a way people have leaned into in many ways to stay more connected and to be able to keep up with people they can't see in the same way. And so I think for us, we have to continue to explore that. I would be honest, we don't have it figured out well. And I feel like very few people have social media figured out, one, because it changes so quickly. and the way people use it is so diverse. You know, there's people who use, you know, Facebook in one way. There's a whole other subset who use a very different way. You know, it's Josh and I were talking about, Josh is heavily on Facebook. He is not at all on Twitter. Well, now our new president is on Twitter. So Josh's like, I got to get on Twitter. I am, I'll be a full disclosure. I don't really, I understand the value of social media. I get overwhelmed with it. So I am not like, if you're trying to talk to me, that is not the avenue for it. And I have to be mindful that it is not the end all be all for everybody, just like email is not. So I think it is understanding how those who are using it want to use it, but also not thinking that is our kind of the one way we're going to be able to communicate out to all groups.
Mhm. Okay, Diana, you are going to ask a question.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm Diana Lara. I'm one of the co-leads for the Emory Latinx Alumni Network here in Atlanta. And this was really helpful. This was extremely insightful. And I think there was a lot of points that you brought up that were like very valid and just like helped me focus in on like, this is how alumni are thinking. So one thing is that like alumni for sure have like a selective attention when it comes to, you know, the emails that we send out or like the types of events that we're hosting. And so I think that selection obviously comes from like identity and like what they relate with and just so many different aspects. And so as the co-lead for the Latinx alumni, we've been finding that we would like to have like a more targeted strategy where like we want to have a campaign that is focused on like our Latinx students and focused on the Latinx alumni and how they can impact those students, because we have like a very different experience. And there's like other organizations on campus like the 1915 Scholars and just like specific groups that we know, like if we are able to like directly like connect with them and support those students, we could have like a better impact. However, I've been hearing back from the Alumni Association that, you know, we want to have more of a broader reach. We want to be more inclusive. We want to reach out to as many people as possible. And so it gets really tough because, you know, it's like we want to build community, but we need to start with our community, right? Like we represent like this group. We all have different affinities, and like how can we better support the affinity group to be the best that they can in their own space? So like I think Emory does have like community. They're just smaller pods. Like we're a group of smaller communities that eventually will be able to like share each other's culture, but we can't do that if we can't develop our smaller like community, if that makes sense. So I feel like that's something I'm struggling with. And then I have a follow-up to that when it comes to branding. Like we don't have a logo. Are we allowed to have a logo? Are we allowed to be branding ourselves in this way? What resources are available for us to have like, you know, that kind of like, we're Emory Latinx alumni and we're proud, like we're Emory, but we're also this subset of a community that you might resonate with and you want to talk to us. So sorry, that was kind of a long-winded
I'll let Cutler answer the other part and answer the simple question that we are working on getting you all your own, we call them graphics. That's what I've been told we need to call them for each network that is uniform but different for the network. So I'm going to follow up on where that is because we are going to get that to you and you are allowed to brand yourself. But Cutler.
Yeah, again, I feel like full transparency is always the best way to go. We're having these discussions because some of it is not necessarily an unwillingness to be able to kind of have more tailored. It's an inability or a capacity issue at this point in time. It is to say, you know what, we have 150,000, and there's one thing I think universities have to have a challenge that other organizations don't. So, I mean, going back to Sephora does it. I mean, yes, they have a really diverse customer base, but it's millions of people, our prospective customers. We have about 150,000. That is extremely, extremely diverse. Aging, you know, going from, you know, 20 to 22 up to, I think somebody emailed the other day who's 102. And so we have to think about how do you do that? And their experiences are different, like their life experiences now are different, but we have to find a way to do better at that. And I think that is why we're trying to shift in all of these directions. It's technological limitations around this, is data limitations. Josh and I, spend a lot of time kind of just talking through where we know we need to be and being really frustrated that we're not there. And so we've, and Sarah can attest to this, is I'm somewhat impatient, and that I want all of this. So when you look at that chart, like we've had to stop as leadership and say, what can we actually do right now? And what are we going to have to do next? And so for us, we don't have the staffing. So we have 4 graphic designers that support everything that we do. And the amount of design work that we do is enormous. And so it's what we still have to be conscious of and take this all in and listen to what are those actual needs. And that's what the Persona Project has helped us to do, is that, okay, we have all of these kind of things that we need to be working on. And we have groups that have really developed a very, very strong sense of community. And if we want to build the Emory community and that Emory connectivity, we have to make sure those groups feel connected to each other, but also connected to that larger Emory community. And so I think for us, I always want the feedback. And I may say, like, and most of them, I'll probably agree with you on where we need to be. But we also have to, I have to kind of balance out, especially now, because in terms of the budget cuts, like I asked for more resources and we don't have it. But that doesn't mean there's certain things that we should stop doing, and that we can start doing. So one thing that we'll be able to stop doing is we're going to have to stop emailing everybody everything about everything. And we're going to have to be able to leverage our new tools to say, well, here is what is relevant to these groups, and really think about it, not from our perspective. And that's kind of, that's always a challenge. It's like we sit in a room a lot of times and we talk about, what do alumni want? This is what I think, as opposed to let's go ask them. And
so can I clarify really quick? So I think there's definitely, like, we need a lot of support when it comes to reaching out to our alumni and engaging them. But I'm thinking more so how alumni can market themselves to students. So how we can, like, target to students and say, hey, we're alumni and we want to help mentor you, or we want to have a conference with you. And then, like, marketing to the students themselves. And we should, I think, have access to that data and also to the staff on campus to have that relationship, because I think by us being proactive and doing that work, it'll naturally raise the attention of other alumni who are like, wait, Emory just did this for their students, or like alumni just interacted with their students in this way, or funded them, whatever it is. Like, I think that's where I'm more focused on right now, instead of like, how can we connect with others? Because that is, that's really hard, and I totally understand that there's
no, but that's so, and so yes, that is I would say is an easier lift, but that is one lift we've been working on. So we've met with Inku, who's head of Campus Life. We've been meeting with Carol Henderson as well, but we keep talking around. There's a strong bifurcation of what is considered the Emory community, like at a broad scale. It is those on campus and the alumni. And Jonathan Butler, those who know him, talks about this a lot. It felt like we were always an afterthought, and that information got shared after that. It has been great because Finbus, when he thinks about Emory community, the Emory community is a more of a collective community. And that means student and alumni need to be interacting more and communicating and supporting each other. And the value for our student experience is that we have this really strong alumni network. But how do we, again, lower barriers of entry and say, it's all right here, let's enable you all to interact more. It hasn't gotten through yet, but there's some ideas even around, like, I don't know if I should even talk about it, Sarah, around the dinners.
I would be glad for you to mention it.
Maybe why don't you talk about it? Because I think that's one area where we're kind of moving in that direction for. It takes the D12 concept and opens it up. Yeah. But there is now I think, momentum in that direction more than we've seen it in the past.
Yep, absolutely. And I will say, Diana, that's something too. The Atlanta team specifically works to build strong relationships with campus. Thankfully, Marche Simpson is usually our Campus Life tie-in, and she has very strong relationships. It is not easy to get student data. So that is definitely, I can tell that's the theme for today, and we can work on that. I will also say it's helpful when the students can see that there's this active alumni network ready and waiting for them when they graduate. So doing things within your members as well is also helpful. But Civic Dinners is the platform Cutler referenced, which is if you're in Atlanta, you might be familiar. It is an online platform that we say is a platform with a purpose, because it hosts various conversations around different social justice topics, or just ones that might be relevant to anyone who wants to be a change agent in their community. So they range from sustainability to racial equality to just general civic engagement. So if Emory were to get a license, which we are exploring because students are interested in this as well, and they would like some more campus traditions, then any student or alum could sign up to host a conversation, and you could say if you wanted it to be for a targeted group of people or open to anyone. And then it brings people together with some guided facilitation guides and expertise shared there to join in that conversation together, and then think about what action you can take in your own communities. So this is all a templated platform that makes it extremely easy for people to go in and do all of this plug and play. So that's something that we're really hoping we can roll out this year, since we know students sometimes don't feel comfortable just with general socializing. They like to have a purpose, whether that's career networking or otherwise. So this could help offer that, but still having the social aspect if they'd like it. So I want to jump to the next question, because I also think it sort of relates what you were just talking about, Cutler, which we never really stated our value proposition. And if there's a difference between, which I think there is, Emory universities versus the alumni associations, and how we want to talk about that. And Michael Young, thank you for asking this. If there's anything else you want to mention about that question, feel free.
Oh, no, I think it was an elementary question. So we're getting to a lot of detail and a lot of really good insights about personas and how we're driving action and unique needs. But at the end of the day, if we're trying to change a culture, or I would say build a culture, you've got to start with some crystal clear principles at the top. You've got to have a capstone that really guides everybody. And it's got to be that purpose that you're talking about, Sarah. And I guess as I'm listening to this, I'm just kind of missing it. And I'm one of the new kids on the block, and so maybe everybody already knows it, and it's just me that doesn't. But that's kind of why I was just asking the question. Hopefully a clear answer. I don't know. Hopefully it's simple.
No, and that is a great question. It's timely in that, we feel like Emory has a clear mission. Like, I mean, their mission statement is pretty succinct. And then AAE, so our umbrella, we are now going through a process because internally as a team, we have a hard time articulating this. I mean, so it's not we've been sitting in, so we just started a culture project within, and it helps us give us focus and like, what is our clear direction and what is our value? Like, why are we doing this? Like, why have a strong interconnected alumni community? And what is our value proposition to alums? And one that we do acknowledge is that value proposition is different at different points in your life. And so there may be a value proposition of having that strong network, that connection, if I need to find a new job, if I need additional training, if I I moved to a new area and I want to kind of build my network out. I mean, for us, you're right, for students, what is that value proposition? But we have to do a better job of defining that. I mean, I have a vision for it, but it's got to be collective.
Well, good. If I can help you define that or refine that, let me know. I'm happy to help.
That'd be great. Yeah, certainly.
And I think we do, you have to build it for each one of your networks, but overall, we want there to be that supportive network that can actually be of value to you, because that's, if you came to campus, you should expect that for the rest of your life. And so then I think each of your networks is finding different ways to actually provide that value to them. And as Cutler said, depending on what they're looking for, they will come to you or engage ideally with another network or offering if that suits their needs right now. But we do need to make sure you all feel comfortable articulating that. So that could be a follow-up session. Okay, so quick questions before you leave, Cutler. One, why is this website, or how is this website redesign different from the past ones? And why do we need to keep redesigning our website?
That is a great question. So we have within AAE over 300 web pages. And you can't find half of them, or you go to one website and it's totally different than others. And we send you to all these different locations. And what we hear, a lot of it is, we built because we wanted to make sure certain things were included. We need to make sure everything was on there. We did not build it from the user experience side. My wife had it, she works in software. So we talk UX all the time, and she's a product manager. So her job is to think through, if this person is coming, they use personas too. If this person is coming in, how are they going to use it? So I think we're kind of at this optimal time, coupled with is now that we feel like we know more. And even in the discovery phase for the website, they interviewed all the staff, we interviewed volunteers, we interviewed alumni as well to talk about what do they want out of it. So we want to build it based on how people can use it and how people should be able to use it. And what we're seeing, there's patterns, because we have websites that we built that they get 3 visits a year. So why do we have it? It creates noise and clutter. And we want to make sure that it, as we think about one part of that journey, that experience it feels seamless and connected. You know, we're getting more questions around content in general. So the website will be, I'll be honest, be very content heavy in that it'll be there, but it'll be searchable. It'll be organized in a way that people can find it better. And so when we really think about that, it's a way that it needs to be more unified and connected. If those who have cruised around Emory's website itself, depending on where you go, you'll find a different design aesthetic. The best websites out there are easy to navigate. You can find information, like they're simple. We don't over design things. There's this debate about over designing because we want to look really, really pretty, but then the UX gets bad. We also have to think about accessibility on our website and everything that we do. We've had tons of conversations around when we do these virtual events, is there closed captioning there? Like, can anybody navigate our pages? And right now, no. And so I think we have to make sure that we think about all of those different user experience concepts when we build it out.
Okay, all right, great. So I know we are at time. Cutler, thank you so much for joining us today. I will say, if there's anything, there was one more question / comment in the chat area that you might want to address. We know that not having a sports program, a lot of alumni wanted to point out that is something that is hurting us. But what are some of the ways that you think leadership has thought about making sure that isn't just hurting us, and other ways that we can sort of, I hate to use the word compensate, but compensate sports affinity?
Yeah, I'll say honestly, this year it's helped us out a lot because the schools that have large sports programs had a massive financial hit, much bigger than ours. So that's probably the one time you say that. And actually, if you look at the trend at a lot of schools, I mean, we've looked at Brown, the number of NCAA Division I programs, the athletic programs that they actually got rid of this year. And it's happening across the board. So that aside, and other schools they have a strong kind of culture. I hate to say that, I don't know the answer to it. I've talked to a lot of students. So that's what I've talked to. We have kind of a group of students that we were meeting with to talk about kind of that overall student experience. I feel like a lot of it comes from that. We have to figure out at the core what it is. We had a meeting the other day talking about homecoming. Those who were in it, we were like, do we even have a homecoming? Like, are we trying to fit a square peg in a round hole? We have to be willing to have those conversations. We're never going to be, I hate to disappoint you, we're not going to have a Division I football program ever. Like, it's one of the things that Finn was saying when he got here is he was excited not to have that. He dealt with it at UT Austin. He's good. But that doesn't mean we can't find other ways. And I think we have to be willing to think a little bit differently around it. We have this kind of like how do you run like a South by Southwest at Emory? Like, it's cultural, it's educational, it's entertainment. Is that something that would bring people back? I mean, we get, a couple thousand people come to homecoming. We have 40,000 people in Atlanta. We can't get them across the street to come over to McDonough Field to watch a free show. So like, what is it that we have to, and I think we have to, again, stop thinking about what we think is the right answer, and we have to ask the right questions to our alumni audience.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, and Diana, to respond to your quick question, Even if events and initiatives are virtual, yes, we want to set aside budget for social media marketing, swag, sending letters. The Atlanta 60 Plus Network can tell you about the letter that they just sent to alumni in their community who have an email address on file, but had a home mailing address. So we'll see what the results are of that letter. So we can certainly talk about ways that you divert your resources, or also, I mean, you will need to pay for some virtual experiences as well. So Cutler, thank you so much for being with us today. I know lots of great topics for us to think about and continue discussing, and we'll send out this information afterwards.
Great. Thank you all so much. Great seeing everybody.
All right, so we are going to go into the breakout room portion of the afternoon. You can take a quick break if you need to run to the restroom while we head to the breakout rooms. An invitation is going to pop up on your screen, sending you to your pre-assigned breakout room. The majority of you are staying in the same breakout room for both topics because it lined up that the same group of people wanted the same topics. And some of you all manually move around for that second slot. And I'll send you all a reminder right at half an hour to get started on your next topic. Before we do that, if you have any questions for me before we go into breakouts that you want to ask in front of the group, please let me know. And Susan, we will connect you with that network. It is in Atlanta, but we will definitely connect you with them. Any questions? Okay. Great. And Carolyn, I'm sorry, because you had your hand raised earlier and we missed that question.
Not a problem at all. And this may be a topic for another day. But obviously having a lot of experience looking back across the kinds of tools we've used to try to connect people and to get people to connect with each other, iModules has suffered from what its predecessor suffered from, which is you are in a space with a lot of empty shell people and a few actual living people. Everyone is thrown in whether they've engaged with the tool or not. And if you haven't engaged, there's a lot of empty space, but you can see them, but they're not there. How will we avoid that in whatever new tool we get so that it actually becomes a vibrant place where alums can connect with each other, alums and students can connect, etc. Because that has been our past issue with that kind of tool.
And sorry, will you clarify, is this with the website or with?
With whatever the iModules replacement is.
Got it. So the iModules replacement will be for sending email communications. So the good news is there that I think Emory Connects is the platform that we can most liken to what you're talking about. It is that virtual platform where we're trying to actually have the connectivity between alums to alums, students.
Yes.
The good news is, because I totally understand you, this is why we worry about launching new social groups if there's not going to be activity. In Emory Connects, one, it's mainly about you making sure there's a robust directory that people can follow up on, and those are personal messages. So we can't see, I mean, we can see on the staff side how many messages are being sent. And we have efforts underway this year, now that we've grown it to 4,000 plus users, making sure that we're doing different campaigns to drive activity within the platform and encourage people to reach out. Some of them, the first was a pilot mentor program that we ran for students and alumni, but we'd also like to run some for early alumni and more mature alumni. And then we're hoping we can do that with different themed audiences. So that's one thing we're trying this year. Also doing some spotlight campaigns to have alumni offer expertise on Emory Connects. So you could take over Emory Connects for the week, and we would say, Carolyn's gonna be in the feed all week, responding to any questions that people want to ask her. So we need to do some campaigns like that to drive engagement. And also we hope that you all will take a look and say, is my network community actually represented in Emory Connects? So that if an alumnus who wants to live in Miami does feel like there's a decent network here to reach out to for informational interviews, we need to make sure we're looking at that and the different diversity, not just the overall number. Marche Simpson also worked on pushing through this year some different affinity tags and identity tags that people could note when they create their profile, which also might make it more inviting for someone to reach out if you know that you can talk about a certain experience. So that's one thing, but Salesforce, so iMods was being used for the email marketing, and that will transition to Salesforce Marketing Cloud will allow us to have different pre-populated templates where we can test the effectiveness and look at analytics on that performance and see how we need to adjust from there.
All right, thanks so much.
Okay. All right, any other questions?
Pandemic, it has accelerated trends that we wouldn't otherwise have adopted. So,
yeah. Hi, Sarah. So they're talking about how they like the virtual expansion of how you can reach such a broad audience, places where you would never be able to reach alumni in El Paso. Now you can go and talk to those people, and you can.
I mean, I was actually going to add. I shared actually with Elizabeth Chapman, I guess last year sometime, that even the San Francisco events, living on the peninsula with the traffic the way that it was, of course now that's traffic now, it was a situation. It was like a 7-hour, for me to get up there and jump on the traffic. And so even I think that I actually think that you can, because I heard before sort of the need to continue to build, not expand so virtually that you're sort of losing traction regionally. But I think acknowledging that there were many things that I would have enjoyed going to in San Francisco that I just couldn't, between kid pickup and, work and just time. Yeah.
Yep.
yeah, the traffic is brutal. I learned that.
Yes, this can really be applied to any market, not just the smaller ones. So absolutely, that's what we're seeing. And it sounds like in the Bay Area, you all are seeing more neighborhood networking popping up. We're seeing that in South Florida, Atlanta. So I think that's going to be a big trend that we embrace as well. I did want to share, you all had initially signed up to go on to different topics for our second slot. Some of you chose to go with network presidents and some generating interest in a virtual world. Do you all want to keep talking in this group, or do you want to move to those other areas to talk about those subjects? Since I know it sounds like you're already talking about the virtual world.
I would like to go talk to the other presidents personally, but y'all can reach me anytime. I'm happy to talk. Anyone has any questions, I've been doing this for quite a while, so.
Okay. So is everyone okay with me moving you all? Any final comments with this group? I didn't want to just interrupt and move you all out.
Fine.
Okay.
Move, please.
It was great meeting everyone.
But great to meet everyone, right?
Yeah.
I have to leave the room too.
Sarah, does the other breakout room pop up?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, you all are staying put. You're just transitioning to the next topic.
Oh, we left.
Sorry about that, but you can just talk. You can just talk right here because you're the only ones in here. You can breakout room. Which one? You're talking about generating interest in a virtual world, which I will join you all in talking about that as well. I'm just moving some around.
So we all signed up for the same thing, Sarah?
Yeah, so that's why I assigned rooms so that people who have the same choices were together for both sessions. Because as you can see, I pre-assigned and it still went wrong. So I was.
No, this is good. We all became friends. This is great.
I was trying to reduce my risk. Yes.
I was like, how did I get
What
that?
are the chances of that?
I know. So you all.
Oh, you're on mute.
I'm just.
Mute, Kevin.
There, better? Okay.
Yeah.
There you go.
Finding interest in a virtual world. Sarah, we had just been talking a little bit about this, and we were talking about the velocity and volume of content that we've been pushing out over the past few months, and wanted to get some feedback about how that's been received.
I'm just moving one more person. Okay. Sorry, I'm just making some moves on my end between these rooms. One moment. If you all want to start talking about that real quick.
So obviously these are extraordinary times, but if we were back in normal times, what would be an appropriate amount of digital outreach? What would that look like? Would it, how often would it be welcome? How many emails would you like to see? What kind of content? Any thoughts on what that would look like in a normal world? Really? Everybody's muted. You're muted.
Oh yeah. Well, I think that I get an email every day from Emory.
Yeah.
But it's maybe I signed up for it, or maybe I got signed up for it. It's like a news every time that Emory's mentioned in the news. And I admit that usually I delete those. However, sometimes if I'm, just have a little time, I'll click it to see where they are in the news. But that's probably the one email I get a day. I haven't thought it's too much. I kind of know that I'm going to get that one. Mm-hmm. But I will say what I've personally been interested in that would pique my interest is we have created these specific regional focuses in certain parts of the country where they've now got, like ours is Steve Roche. Each one of you has a different person for your region, but it's actually become much better. It's become a much better, well-oiled machine as far as getting to know people. And I think, like we discussed earlier, having these affinity groups where you focus on the particular alumni, what they bring to the table, what they're interested in. The one area that's a little bit of a deficit, and obviously I think this is one area I think we can actually improve upon in the pandemic, is faculty engagement. So many of the alumni, if you ask them what is their best experience at Emory, I don't care if they're in the Rollins School of Public Health, the law school, Goizetta, undergrad, they have some professor who was really meaningful to them. And a lot of these professors, I'm told, are beginning, especially in the undergraduate school, to retire. However, I do think that there's some, like right now as we move into election season, getting a few of like Dr. Abramowitz or some of these folks to do a virtual meeting on a specific topic could be really good. And I say that because we're not having to pay for them to travel. In the past, they've had to come up to Washington, D.C., spend a night. It takes time out of their day. And it just seems to me to be an easy way to engage a lot of alumni who may not necessarily have interacted for a while with their specific alumni chapter, or they may be in a different part of the United States where they don't necessarily have one nearby. That is a good way to bring people in without that, as you were saying, Kevin, the focus being on initially, what are you going to donate? It brings them in on something that they're interested in before there's any more engagement.
Yeah.
I think Sarah would agree with me. I think, we're really well positioned to do that. And you're absolutely right. The faculty presentations we've done have been well received.
Kevin, could you note there what the 60 Plus network is planned for their series, just as an idea for the other networks?
We have, as we just completed the first installment of Gary Hawk talking about the history of Emory and the three installments. We have we have two faculty at Goizetta lined up for an event later in the fall. And I wish I could pull that up, Sarah.
Okay, well, basically, I just want to note I think we will have larger faculty presentations and definitely talking about trending topics like the elections briefings and predictions. There's a Supreme Court analysis coming up. But then what you all can think about is how could we then discuss that content or make it even more relevant to our community so that we can keep cascading those insights out through the community, because some people miss the main presentation or they listen to it, but then they miss the interaction piece. So one thing we're thinking of is hosting, or we will host an alums play that she can, it was on Broadway, she can offer it via Zoom, and then she'll do a panel discussion or a Q&A discussion afterwards with an Emory professor. The play brings up a lot of insights about different identities. It's about the suffragette movement, so voting and politics, but also identities and feminism. So then we want to get different networks together to have discussions on one of those topics presented in the play. And it's sort of like a book club, or having that wine after the theater outing that we usually have. So that's what I think you all can think about. And what the 60 Plus Network did was say, what would our community specifically want to hear about from Emory faculty? And let's get them to come talk directly to our community so that it just feels a little more special. And again, you might ask questions during those presentations that you wouldn't otherwise if it was a larger, broader audience. But are there some other ideas that you all are tossing around that you want to talk through about? The first thing I ask when I meet with alumni right now is, how can we continue being relevant to you and not offering Zoom presentations? Like, what are other ways that we can provide connectivity and experiences? So are there any ideas you all want to suggest?
Along that same line of the virtual play, probably a virtual concert that we could probably either a alum like, you know, Carrie Hilson, or you know, a local artist here in Atlanta, or even a professor such as Dwight Andrews. You know, that would be great to have a virtual jazz concert to engage alumni that way.
Yep, absolutely. Yes, if you can reach out to any alumni who you know with special talents, that was an idea too. We had to drive membership on Facebook groups, was to host some Facebook Live events. We've been doing it successfully on the larger Emory channel, but you do it on, Kevin, I know you're on the board for the Caucus of Emory Black Alumni. So do they have some ongoing like Friday fun nights where you're actually streaming something that an alum is performing just to offer some new content at home? So I know some people just joined us. We're tossing out ideas. If anyone wants to just brainstorm them together on new ways to provide value and connectivity and education, isn't just your traditional Zoom presentation.
Bingo.
Yeah. What was
Bingo.
that?
Bingo.
Oh, bingo. I love it. I mean, why not go back to the basics? I've been really enjoying virtual game nights.
Sarah mentioned the 60 Plus group. That's a new group, and I'm the liaison to that. But one of the things that they did was that in their mission statement, they they wanted to reconnect that cohort of alums in Atlanta who feel out of touch with the Emory campus. So they've set up affiliations, or in the process of affiliations with the Rose Library, with Schwartz Center, Kevin, to your point about concerts and whatnot, and with the Carlos Museum, and so those are all opportunities to reconnect those folks to the campus itself, because a lot of them never see the campus anymore, it's been successful. So there have been just been a cascade of ideas that have come out of that sliver of mission statement. So.
Yep.
I think Carolyn's going to say something.
Kevin's right on, but as we would have said back then, right? But the plus for us has been that we're in a virtual world, because we have our group is 60 plus, but we have folks who are well into their 80s who are participating. And a lot of people don't want to get on the road to drive over to the campus after 6 o'clock. It can take a long time. So having the virtual events has allowed us actually to connect people. We just did a webinar with Gary Hawk or actually it was a Zoom meeting with Gary Hall. And I know at least one person was participating who was in North Carolina. And our group is supposed to be an Atlanta group. So we're finding the use of technology super helpful, and I hope that we'll stick with it even when we go to live events.
Steve, do you mind if I pick on, or I don't know if you want to speak to the Entrepreneur Network event that's being planned for September? I thought that was a different take on your usual format.
In terms of the panel, so sort of the micro presenters?
Yes, yeah, like the micro experts. So
yeah. Yes, so I mean, you know, there's different facets to entrepreneurship, and you know, we thought that trying to serve up content in smaller kind of bite-sized fashion, hearing from entrepreneurs who are alumni, hopefully in most cases, and talk about things such as, you know, how did they make the journey from the corporate world to entrepreneurship, or, you know, how do they think about raising money, or how do they think about selling their business, and these kinds of things, and make them a very short format. So it's going to be, I think we're going to try for something that looks a lot like small TED Talks, and then stitch them together into one event and see how that goes. But I think it'll resonate with people, and people will like it because there'll be a variety of content in very short kind of bite-sized segments. But we'll see. This will be the first one that we're really trying. And I think that you know, the Zoom format may actually work really, really well for this, because people sort of are going to be able to talk to their audience directly. And although not make direct eye contact, we may be able to have more attendees than we would be able to pull towards a physical event typically.
Any questions or things you all are wondering about, trying to test?
Sarah, are y'all doing the Carter Center Town Hall virtually this year? Is he going to do a town hall?
He's not.
He's not. Okay. I was thinking that would be something that you could
that'd be
really
great.
share with a lot of people in a way you don't typically.
Yep. Yep. Yes. May, are there, I know you've had some ideas too about engaging because you are a complete digital network. So you've done the webinars, the online chats. Are there new tactics that you want to try this year?
So we've been talking.
Nope. Sorry, you're good.
Okay. So we've been talking a little bit with, so we regularly work with Paul Brederman in the Career Center because he focuses on the students who want to join environmental careers. And one thing we do in most years is our Atlanta-based chair and members will participate in Green Networking Night, which is a big yearly event where students can come meet people in all sorts of environmental industry spaces. And we try to tell them about our group so that they know they can join us when they graduate, and encourage different alums to go and participate in it if they're local. And they're thinking about now, for the moment, they pushed it to the spring in the hopes that they can still have it in person, but we're trying to think about what is a networking event that we can put on for students and alumni that would be virtual but still have some of that casual interaction that you can get at a regular networking night. And so our current thought process is either during one event with breakout rooms, or having sort of separate events every night of the week for a different subtopic. So because our industry is very broad but has a lot of different permutations. You can have public health folks that are working in an environmental sort of health space. You can have engineers, you can have lawyers. So we're thinking about breaking those groups up, getting some alums at various stages in their careers to come represent those groups and be a space where alums or students can come and have little sort of organic chats with maybe a couple of facilitating questions about that career space to try to give them some element of what they'd get otherwise at Green Networking Night. And otherwise, we're thinking of just, I think, similar to what folks were talking about when I joined, about good social events to do over the Zoom platform. We're trying to figure out a virtual trivia night at the moment, but we haven't quite sussed out the details.
Great. That's fantastic that you are thinking so much about that student experience, and that you have a clear representative on campus who you can go to for some support there.
And May, I just wanted to jump in. Hi, I'm Sherry, and I work with the New York City Network, and for the past 2 months, we've been doing a wonderful Wednesday happy hour with trivia, which has been a blast. And we've been using a platform called Kahoot. So I don't know if that's something you want to check out, but it is, we feel like we're on a game show. It's so much fun. So I just wanted to throw that out there to you.
Thanks.
Any other questions about things you could utilize this year? Thoughts that you want to toss out to the group? What did you all think about that civic dinners idea, since we're exploring that platform? Could you utilize that for member engagement?
That's great.
I sent you a quick email between sessions because I was wondering if you had an idea of when Emory might sort of get that license that you were talking about to use that.
We are hoping any day now. We still have to have it approved, but then we could implement it. We would go through the implementation process in September. I think we need a few weeks to do that. So ideally we could start it in October. It would be great to announce with our homecoming and reunion hub. Yeah, May, that would be a great way to identify members for your group. For those of you who do have identities or affinities where you are, we don't always have that data in our system. So this would be a great way for you to draw out those potential members.
Well, good.
Any other questions? I might go ahead and close those other breakout groups. Unless we want to come back. Any other questions beyond virtual programming that you wanted to bring up to this group? Nicole?
This may be a little bit funny, but this could work. I don't know, this virtual room thing, kind of like speed dating. I mean, you could come up with an event where you have like 3 or 4 guests and you kind of randomly assign people to rooms and you see how they interact, or you give them a different topic, and it could be kind of fascinating. I mean, I know it sounds a little psychological, but there may be people who kind of like that aspect of it, that you can easily shift people this way and find different ways to make it more intimate, but also to maybe have people interact with different subgroups.
Yep, absolutely. That's a great idea. You could have a speaker and then break people out and just say, give them some discussion prompts. I like that.
Sarah, is there any information or news about the incoming president maybe doing a town hall meeting coming up?
Yes, Kevin, I'm glad you asked. He will be doing something as part of our virtual homecoming and reunion celebration. So that will be a part of our virtual hub that we will be sending you more information about. That will be a mix of interactive events, presentations. It will be live October 23rd through 25th, and some sessions will be pre-recorded and some activities will be live. And then alumni will have access to that platform for 3 weeks after that weekend.
And then will we have opportunity to ask questions?
I believe so. That is, I would assume so. I haven't confirmed the format, but I would assume there would need to be a Q&A, whether that was pre-sent or live questions.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, absolutely. All right, so I know we had some folks drop off. I very much apologize that our pre-assigned breakout rooms did not work. I hope you had time for interaction, and in case anyone wants to stay on the line, I wanted to make sure that those of you who need to jump off can leave, and anyone who wants to stay on the line, ask questions, continue chatting with each other. We will leave this Zoom open to do that. And then I will send out a post-conference email with Cutler's presentation, some other resources that we mentioned, and then also a survey so that we can understand from you how you'd like to continue connecting with each other around which topics, and then what content we just need to add to our alumni volunteer toolkit that we are continuing to populate. So thank you all so much for your service and your great work during these really challenging times. I hope you all stay safe and healthy. And again, please stay on the line if you'd like to keep talking, because I didn't want to interrupt good conversations.
Sarah, how do we find the toolkit? Where is that? Something emailed, or is that, where is that?
I will send that out. I'll email it too, because I know I've sent out a lot of links, but it's emory.edu/toolkit.
And Sarah, I just want to say for those that were in my breakout room specific to network presence and shares, I know there was a truncated conversation about training and leadership there. So those are notes that I'll share back with Sarah and our team, but maybe if you all want to stay on the line that we could weave into some of this Q&A period up until 4 o'clock. So.
Yep, any network presidents who want to stay on the line and talk through questions, please stay. Okay, bye, Carolyn.
I've got a question that may be a little more directed at Carter, but I didn't feel like bringing it up at that time. He talked a lot about how people being over communicated to. We're kind of having the opposite, I think. We're a very large network, 12,000 people. We have events coming up every 2 weeks with Maine, Emory, alumni and college speakers, business school, and Harry Hawk. And we want to get the communication out. So how do we communicate? Well, you can send an email, but you can only send one every 2 weeks on Friday afternoon. Yep. What about people who have email? We can send a letter, but you can only send out 189 letters. So, and with me, when I look at emails, if I see an email I don't want to look at, it takes me 2 seconds to just not even open it up. So I don't see what the harm is in sending out more emails so people who do want to get the information, get the information. And if you don't want it, you just don't open it up.
Steve, you bring up a great question that I know is on the minds of many of our volunteers. We do want to provide new communications outlets to you, and we do talk about being more strategic with email. Unfortunately, increasing the email volume will not necessarily satisfy the problem, and that's what Cutler mentioned, but he didn't get into the data. But when we look overall at the number of emails that Emory alumni are receiving from us, it is an overwhelming amount, and I forget the number, I can give it to you later. But we are worried about having alumni unsubscribe from emails because they may want to hear from your network, but if they unsubscribe from another Emory email because they just thought they didn't want to get that one, then unfortunately we have to take them off the whole system. And we're working on some ways to improve that, but that is something that we're fighting. And what we want to lean into, because we hear often that alumni say, they will pay attention to an email from someone they know. And you just said that, if you see a name that you recognize. Staff too, I know the more relationships that I build, the easier it is to get a response from people when I email them directly. And they'll say, I didn't see that larger invitation at all. So what we really like to figure out is a scalable model for more of the peer-to-peer communications. And so we actually have a platform, it's called Volunteer by Evertrue, that some of you could start, all of you could start utilizing. Our peer-to-peer fundraisers will be utilizing it this year. And that will allow you to search for alumni who you'd like to email and reach out to them specifically, probably like no more than 10 at a time because it's still a manual process. But you can develop your own systems. We also had in the past, our network chair for our over 40 in Atlanta group, he kept a personal mailing list of alumni who he would reach out to because they said they wanted to hear from him. So he would just repackage or forward on something. It doesn't have to be a ton of work, but it was making sure that it went from his inbox directly to theirs. One thing we want to do. The second I would say this year is getting smarter with the social ads. So that also will be a helpful addition as well to drive traffic, to look at the network page or the Facebook group and make sure that they're tuning in there. And then the third piece would be that removal of iModules and addition of Salesforce Marketing Cloud and actually having analytics on what email templates are working. We might find that our emails perform better than the larger Emory emails that come from the schools. One statistic I do know is that a school email from Emory performs better than just a general branded Emory email. And I think that probably makes sense to most of you because you have your school affinity. So we might also find that the network emails start performing better than the other emails, and then we can make the case to add more of those and lean into those. But those analytics will be helpful, and us also testing out some formats that we don't have the capability to do right now. So those are the three things I think that will be helpful. In addition to that, we did talk about getting data on our users. So if people are clicking on things on the website that relate to your network, then can we reach out, make sure they're following your network? May, we mentioned something like civic dinners. We have our Emory Sustainability Network. It's often hard to know who cares about sustainability because it's not necessarily their profession. So if they participated in a sustainability civic dinner, let's make sure to add them to that network mailing list. So there are some ways that I think we can get smarter about reaching out to people. But unfortunately, I don't think mass emails will be the way to go.
I have a follow-up question. So when you say if we do like ads or like want to use like social media, we're trying to drive them to our network page. I'm not 100% sure that we have a network page that like we have control of and that we can, advertise our items. So is there like, what is your recommendation in terms of like directing people to our network if it's not like Facebook or Instagram or email?
Yes, that is a great question, Diana. And I know you mentioned that too, because you have an Emory Connects group. So on our new website, we want to have regional web pages so that there actually is a hub where you can direct them to. Because right now we have the networks portion of our website and you're all listed, but it tells you to either email the chair or go on the Facebook group. And then that becomes your landing hub. And so for right now, that would be it, is that we want to make sure that you're added to our mailing list. So if they're unsure, they can email us and we'll add them. Follow the Facebook group and make sure they're looking out for the emails and moving them over to their inbox and not their junk folder. That's an important thing as well. So unfortunately right now that would be our solution. And they can also bookmark the alumni.emory.edu/calendar, our calendar of upcoming events. That's always what I tell people to do as well. But in the latter half of the year, we want you to just be able to say, go to this Atlanta page and it will list all the networks and you'll have more of a hub. But that is a challenge.
Sarah, I wanted to bring something from one of our breakout rooms that we didn't have time to cover, might be topical for the group here, is pertinent to alumni data, as we're talking about paid ads, social, all of that, how we're leveraging LinkedIn, paid ads on LinkedIn and driving traffic where folks are connecting professionally that may drive engagement or connection back to a local regional group or activities that are going on that we can use that versus email or other methods. So how LinkedIn and Emory Connects plays into kind of that strategy and what financial ability there might be to leverage that a little more better in the coming year.
I think that's going to have to be a question specifically to our social media guru, Venus. So we can ask her about that because we have used some LinkedIn ads in the past. I know the business school does more than we do. So I'll have to ask them if that is because they're seeing better performance on Instagram and Facebook ads or what. In terms of LinkedIn, are you saying alumni activity on LinkedIn, making sure it's reflected back in our system or their data?
So I'll say, if Alicia and Beverly are still on the line, I know it was a discussion point for both of them before our breakout room ended, so I don't want to speak for them, but Alicia, I know you were bringing it up right when we got cut off and brought back to the larger group, so I'll defer to you.
Oh, I get the best response on LinkedIn, and this has been something I learned from one of these conferences several years ago. Is that the person? Yeah, Scott. Yep, learned it from Scott. Keep stealing from Scott. The personal reach out of I will individually I'll do a mass email. I'll post it on every network, and then I will individually reach out when I'm, got a lot of energy. Sometimes it doesn't happen, but I'll watch TV and I'll just copy and paste the same message individually to people, and that gets a great response because then they see me as a human being, as my profile on LinkedIn, and that gets a really good response.
So that would fall under that peer-to-peer efforts. That's exactly right, Alicia. That and I find that too as a staff member. I think many of you on career events in which we went for the speakers and we messaged them on LinkedIn because maybe we didn't even have their updated email address. And we have some systems that bring over LinkedIn information into our dashboard so that we can run searches on it, which is helpful. And then we can decide who we want to message from there. But Alicia, I think that's great. It is manual, and that's why it's wonderful if the board divides up, like we're all going to reach out to 10 people on LinkedIn. Maybe staff help you develop that targeted list that you want to specifically message to, because those are more important people to have at an event or to come out. But that's really great to hear.
In terms of further communication, are we allowed to do like call banking or anything like that where, if they register for our event or something, we can follow up and say, thank you so much for registering. We'd love to remind you that this is coming up or something.
Yes, we would love that. I think we all need to, I think staff need to get better about doing that as well. And in fact, we were just talking about doing a better job with that after people attend activities. So yes, you could tell us when you want to do that and how you'd like to segment the list, if it's a certain type of person you're going after or people who registered for an event. And as long as they don't have a do not call me on their record, then we can provide you that information. And texting might be better. I know some people are more comfortable receiving the text. So yeah, that's a great idea.
I was going to say text too, because I get, reminders from my dentist and my vet. I've got events coming up or thanking me, and I'm more likely to see that half the time than another email, because I get, 100 emails a day.
Right. And we all, yes. I love when I get a nice text reminder for that doctor's appointment. It's so helpful. All right there. You can ignore it if you want. Okay. Any other questions, ideas? Lori, I want to say kudos to you for continuously selling out your book club each month that you've transitioned to virtually.
I was just going to mention that, Sarah, that we talked about that in our breakout room about the book clubs and the success of them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so actually Zoom has made it kind of interesting because we have new folks that, actually we've had a couple of them. Linda from New York came to one of them. She runs the New York book club, but we've had a couple of ones where we've had people from out of the Atlanta area or the suburbs, because normally they wouldn't come in. But Zoom does fine with book club. We just miss our potlucks and our wine. We have to do that.
Everyone brings their own though, right? Their own wine?
I do want to say one thing about communication though, just throwing it out there that when I first moved back to Atlanta, there were emails that would come that were like all the events in Atlanta, and then they stopped for a while, and I'm really happy to see them back. I know that for folks in the book club anyway, that they really appreciate those. I guess they're targeted in geographic means, so that it lists everything that's happening in the Atlanta area, whether it's entrepreneurship or over 40 or book club or whatever, but it's all in one place, the things in their area that they can choose to go to or not. So
Okay.
those have been effective, I think.
All right, I'm glad to hear that. We know we took a bit of a pause on those to send some COVID communications, but we're all pushing for those to come back immediately. That's good to hear.
Hey guys, it's Lisa. I'm back. I'm in the car now. I've left the hotel. And it is, so I'm listening in. Yes, I just want to echo what Lori said, that we are getting more interest now that we've been included on back to where we're in the main email, and we appreciate that. And there was a lot of interest this past meeting when we talked about, such as the John Lewis movie that's going to be coming up. I really appreciate that. I don't think everyone, I'm not sure how those different emails are targeted, because not everyone had heard about that. And then lastly, on the breakout session, there was someone from San Francisco like, hey, I want some information about book club. We have, during the initial session, Linda, Lori, and I had made a commitment in 2 weeks. We're going to be getting together, talking about the New York Book Club, the Atlanta Book Club, as well, to kind of share some best practices. Invited the person who is from San Francisco interested as well. So if there's anyone else that's sort of unofficial, that came back together today, that might have an interest in that, then certainly let's make sure we connect.
That's great. Thank you, Lisa. If you share the date that you all do that, we could share that out with volunteers or potentially reach out to some people who we think would be more interested in joining that call. But we certainly love to see that cross the country partnership, because we do think there will be opportunities for you all to co-sponsor more events together and just have a larger impact.
Or if you could do that since I'm driving.
That's fine. But one of the things, like Linda, I was in her breakout group that is, I guess, a limitation. I don't know. It's got both ways. Is that we meet regularly. We definitely have a group of people that meet regularly, but book clubs are not really meant to be big events.
Yep.
When you meet with a book club, you know, if you have 50 people, that's just not a good, it's not going to be a good meeting. So we've always tried to, when we were meeting in person, we said, oh my God, what are we going to do if we have more than 20 people? And we really haven't. It's generally been 20 and under. With Zoom meetings, we've specifically made it 20 max, though maybe 25 might work. Book clubs are not meant to be those huge events that you get tons of people to participate in, like other things. So just.
Well, have you thought about doing some breakout rooms and just making sure that there were lead facilitators assigned to the rooms? Or even hosting like 3 separate events all about the same book on different dates, and just again making sure different volunteers stepped up to conversation.
I have to say, when we did the book group years ago, when it was in New York, we started filtering, you know, like it kind of grew, mushroomed, because everybody agreed they have to be small. And it's a more intimate meeting and a more connecting one. But that did happen, and it's I mean, I've only had 2 meetings so far, so I'm hoping it grows. So that's the goal, you know.
Yep.
Maybe I know we've had some interest when we were doing physical meetings, that people were saying, oh, maybe we could have like an Alpharetta group or a Peachtree City group or whatever. People that didn't want to drive, we were you know, having them in the Emory area. So I guess via Zoom, but right now our dynamics are our regular folks tend towards 50 plus. I'm not sure how great they would do with breaking out rooms. Maybe if we facilitated it a little bit the first couple of times. But secondly, it's a social group. I don't know how people would feel about, like, I'm not in the same room, you know, like I really wanted to see everybody, and don't want to be broken into groups, but you can think about it.
I was just thinking.
So I have to say that luckily our numbers have matched what we needed. So we haven't had 35 trying to join at once. And so I think if we did something with national things and there was more interest, we could look at doing that. But one thing that I would like some clarification on is in a recent email, and I certainly could have read it wrong, where they talked about sort of restructuring, and I know financially and resources are getting tougher, especially around COVID. My concern was when I was reading about support financially and also through your office, it was very based on numbers, and like if you're over 100 people at this or whatever. And I almost felt like the way I was reading it was, wow, we're not going to get any support now financially or whatever, because we are only 20 or 25 each month. But to get some recognition. Wait, you made every single month the last 7 or 8 years, and I want to make sure that someone like our group is still going to have. We don't need a lot of support at all, but that we are still somewhat supported.
Mm-hmm. Yep, we are still awaiting our budget for this year. I will say that we are encouraging, because we do want to support a larger number of networks and groups. We are just encouraging people to think about how they can keep things cost neutral, because we know that there are instances in which we have to spend money. But we do also want to ask our alumni to find ways that they can contribute themselves. And yes, we could supplement some of it, but we will ask some of those questions. Is this bringing out new members? Because we do have to make sure that our resources are spent. If we have 155,000 plus alumni, we do have to make sure that we're thinking about how we're reaching those and using our resources accordingly. So I don't want to say, no, there will not be anything available, because, and you're right, it does deserve recognition that you all are consistent in offering this outlet, but we do have to just be thinking about how we're using our funds and why funding was needed for this versus something else. So we will be asking those questions. How does it tie back to the Emory mission? Why is this event unique? How is it drawing out a new audience? Could you not find someone to help sponsor it or supplement, that sort of thing? Any additional questions?
I just want to make a comment. I just want to make a comment on what you just said. I understand the need for budgeting, and I know you realize what I'm going to say too, but I just want to make it really clear that investing, especially in over 40 and over 60 groups, is going to pay back big time. Because, you know, investing a little bit of money for an event or something, if you get even one major contributor from that, you more than
well, right. So Steve, that you would be included in that. You all are new networks, and we need to make sure that we're giving you some resources to, well, one, I mean, all networks will have access to apply to resources. So I don't want that to come across that you would not. But yes, we would think you all are launching. We need some ways to make sure people are learning about your networks and that we're driving membership. So absolutely. We just have a pool of funds that we have to manage. Like when you mentioned the letters, like why can we only send out so many letters? And then you all said, we would be happy to fund some of those stamps and postage. That's great. That's an example where someone might step up to say, I'm happy to help with that.
Okay, thanks.
All right, well, I know we are over time. I'm glad this group got to stay on in a small group and keep chatting. But I know there's, again, lots of concerns around communications, so we hear that. Communications, access to students, wondering about the funding for this year. So those are probably, and the tools. So those are the top areas where we'll be investigating and getting more specifics for you all. But I know most of you on the line, again, have been volunteering here for years. So thank you for your continued service. And we look forward to making this year even better. Even though it will be a hybrid virtual world, I still feel like you all are getting even more creative with ideas, and that's great. And then people will be even more excited to come back together in person. So thank you all for your time.
I have one small engagement idea that is more undergrad specific, but I think some of the graduates would maybe appreciate witnessing it. I was a part of a video for a nonprofit I volunteer for. They had a birthday celebration digitally, and everybody was invited to submit a 3-second video holding the artwork we had purchased from the nonprofit. So I was thinking if we could do a virtual song fest where we could all, you know, like I could sit there and do my Harris Hall for 3 seconds. Like a TikTok kind of video. I think that would be a great engagement opportunity, because I was on a call the other day with several people and they were like, what is Songfest? It was non-Emory people, and all the Emory people just jumped right in with the pride in Songfest. And I don't see that in alumni engagement a lot. And I know came in second, and I'm still mad about it 10 years
Wow.
later. So there's an idea there. Somebody should capitalize.
I love that. I will look into that because I hope they are exploring it. And Nicole and Marche's networks in Atlanta usually do some in-person gatherings around Songfest. So we'll find out how we could do that. But I think it's great. I mean, we would like to see more social participation anyway, regardless of a pandemic, for alumni to feel like they're a part of those campus traditions as well and remember them. So I love that idea. Thank you. All right, well, I hope everyone gets to enjoy the rest of their Saturday afternoon and weekend. And thank you again for spending this time with us.
Thank you, Sarah. This is great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.